Hi guys, tonight we're traveling into the rugged mountains, vast deserts, and hidden valleys of the American Southwest, where generations of Apache people built lives of remarkable resilience long before the modern world arrived. As the evening settles around you, imagine standing beneath an endless sky, streaked with fading orange light. The air is dry. The distant outline of mountains darkens against the horizon. Somewhere beyond the rocky ridges, smoke rises from a small camp where families prepare for another quiet night beneath the stars. This is a story that stretches across centuries. It's a story of survival, adaptation, courage, and endurance. It is also a story often misunderstood. Many people know the Apache only through tales of conflict and warfare, yet those famous struggles represent only a small part of a much longer journey. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you settle in, let me know your location and local time in the comments below. It is always fascinating to see where people around the world are listening from. Now, dim the lights. Your mind drifts across a landscape unlike almost any other in North America. Sharp mountain ranges rise from broad desert basins. Dry riverbeds wind through valleys. Pine forests crown higher elevations, while cactus and scrub brush dominate the lower country. During summer, the heat can feel relentless. During winter, snow may blanket mountain passes. Life here demands flexibility. Long before written records mention the Apache, their ancestors moved gradually into the southwest from northern regions of the continent. Historians continue to study exactly when these migrations occurred. Archaeological evidence suggests that groups speaking languages related to Apache communities began arriving in the Southwest many centuries before Europeans first appeared. For a moment, it feels as though you are walking beside one of these early travelers. The journey is slow. The landscape is immense. Every ridge reveals another horizon. Families move together, carrying possessions, knowledge, and traditions passed through generations. Children learn by observing elders. Hunters study animal tracks pressed into dry earth. Gatherers recognize useful plants hidden among rocks and brush. According to research supported by scholars at institutions such as Harvard University and the University of Arizona, linguistic evidence connects Apache ancestors to broader northern populations whose descendants spread across large portions of western North America. The details remain complex, but the connection helps explain how Apache communities became part of a larger story of migration and adaptation. Yet historians still debate the exact routes and timings of these movements. Some evidence points toward gradual migrations over centuries, while other interpretations suggest periods of more rapid expansion. No complete agreement survives. The uncertainty itself feels fitting. Life leaves traces wars. Time erases many of them. As generations pass, Apache communities become deeply connected to the Southwest. The land is not simply a place to live, it becomes part of identity itself. You notice how every feature of the environment matters. Water sources determine travel routes. Mountain passes provide protection and access. Forests offer wood and game. Valleys support gathering and seasonal camps. Nothing is wasted. Nothing's taken for granted. A cool evening breeze carries the scent of juniper. Small fires flicker against approaching darkness. The crackling wood provides warmth as stories move from one generation to the next. Those stories matter. In societies without written books, memory becomes a treasure. History lives through spoken words. Knowledge survives because people remember. You sit quietly beside the fire and imagine listening to elders describe distant journeys, unusual weather, successful hunts, and lessons learned through experience. The stars overhead seem impossibly bright. The modern world feels very far away. Apache ancestors learned to thrive in one of the most challenging environments on the continent. They become experts in movement across difficult terrain. They understand seasonal changes with remarkable precision. They know where water can be found during drought and which routes remain passable during storms. This knowledge is power, not the kind of power measured by wealth or monuments, a different kind, the power to survive. Many ancient civilizations left behind massive cities or towering structures. The Apache followed a different path. Their success depended less on permanent construction and more on flexibility. Mobility allows communities to respond quickly to changing conditions. You begin to understand why outsiders often misunderstood them. European observers frequently measured societies according to familiar standards such as large settlements or extensive agriculture. Yet survival in the Southwest often required entirely different strategies. Permanent concentration in one location could create vulnerabilities. Mobility provided security. The night grows cooler. A blanket of stars spreads overhead. Somewhere nearby, a child falls asleep beside family members after a long day of travel. An elder quietly repairs equipment by firelight. Hunters discuss tomorrow's plans. Life continues through countless ordinary moments. These moments rarely appear in famous history books, yet they form the foundation of everything that follows. Research conducted by scholars from Stanford University and the University of New Mexico highlights how indigenous communities of the Southwest developed highly sophisticated environmental knowledge over centuries. Such expertise allowed people to flourish in regions that outsiders often viewed as inhospitable. As you look across the dark landscape, you begin to appreciate the scale of that achievement. Survival here requires observation, patience, discipline, and cooperation. No one succeeds entirely alone. Families depend on one another. Communities share responsibilities. Skills pass from elders to younger generations. Experience accumulates slowly. Year after year, generation after generation, the Apache world grows from these relationships. Before soldiers arrive, before forts appear, before newspapers print dramatic headlines, there is simply the land and the people who know it intimately. A distant owl calls through the darkness. The sound lingers briefly before fading into silence. You pause. The silence feels enormous. The mountains stand unchanged beneath moonlight. The same peaks watched over countless generations before any outsider recorded their existence. They witnessed migrations, births, celebrations, hardships, and triumphs. They remember everything, or at least it seems that way, as the first chapter of this long journey settles around you. The Apache remain a people shaped by movement, memory, and landscape. Their future conflicts and struggles are still far beyond the horizon, for now. Their story begins with adaptation to a remarkable homeland, and in the quiet stillness of the desert night, beneath stars untouched by modern light, that homeland feels almost timeless. The night deepens around you as the fire settles into glowing embers. A faint ribbon of smoke drifts upward through the cool air. Somewhere beyond the camp, a coyote calls across the darkness. The sound is distant, almost lonely, yet it belongs perfectly to this landscape. You remain in the Apache world long before European contact, when generations of families move through mountains, valleys, forests, and deserts according to rhythms refined over centuries. Life here follows the seasons, not clocks, not calendars hanging on walls. The land itself becomes the guide. Spring brings new plant growth and opportunities for gathering. Summer opens routes through higher elevations where cooler temperatures offer relief from the desert heat. Autumn brings harvests and preparation. Winter encourages careful planning and cooperation. You walk beside a family preparing for another day of travel. The morning air feels crisp. Horse breath does not yet cloud the dawn because horses have not entered Apache life. People move primarily on foot. Dogs assist with carrying loads. Every item transported must justify its weight. This reality shapes everything. Possessions remain practical. Skills matter more than objects. Knowledge becomes one of the most valuable resources a person can possess. A young child watches an elder identify edible plants growing among rocky slopes. The lesson appears simple, yet hidden within it are generations of accumulated observation. Which roots can be eaten safely? Which berries ripen first? Which plants become medicine? The answers mean survival. Research supported by scholars at Yale University and the University of California has emphasized the extraordinary ecological knowledge held by indigenous peoples throughout the Southwest. Such understanding developed through direct experience across many generations, rather than through written manuals. You notice how learning happens constantly. No formal classroom exists. The landscape itself becomes the teacher. Every journey offers instruction. Every mistake carries consequences. As the day warms, people spread across the surrounding terrain gathering food. Some collect seeds, others harvest plants. Hunters move carefully through brush and woodland searching for deer, rabbits, or other game. The process requires patience. Hours may pass quietly. A successful hunt is never guaranteed. You hear the crunch of dry soil beneath moccasins. You smell warm earth heating beneath the rising sun. A hawk circles overhead, carried effortlessly by invisible currents of air. The world feels alive. Every detail matters. Apache communities develop flexible economies suited to varied environments. Hunting, gathering, trade, and limited agriculture combine in different ways depending on local conditions. There is no single Apache experience because numerous groups occupy different regions across the Southwest. This diversity is important. Outsiders often imagine indigenous peoples as uniform societies. Reality is far more complex. Various Apache communities adapt to different landscapes while maintaining shared cultural connections. You arrive at a seasonal gathering place where families exchange goods and information. Friendly conversations fill the air. News travels through personal contact rather than written reports. Someone describes unusual weather conditions farther south. Another reports successful hunting grounds. A third shares information about relatives living many miles away. The exchange feels casual, yet it strengthens community bonds. Trade networks extend surprisingly far. Materials, tools, ideas, and stories move between different groups. The Southwest is not isolated. It forms part of an interconnected world shaped by movement and communication. According to findings discussed by researchers from the University of Chicago and other institutions, indigenous trade networks across North America often connected communities separated by vast distances. Goods could travel remarkably far through chains of exchange. You sit beside several elders during the evening meal. The scent of roasted meat mingles with wood smoke. Children listen carefully as stories unfold. Some stories entertain, others teach. Many accomplish both. Oral traditions preserve history, values, and identity. They help explain the world and humanity's place within it. They also connect younger generations to ancestors whose names may no longer be remembered individually but whose wisdom survives. The firelight dances across thoughtful faces. The atmosphere feels peaceful, yet life remains demanding. Food shortages sometimes occur. Drought can create hardship. Illness appears without warning. Dangerous animals occasionally threaten camps. Human beings must constantly adapt to uncertainty. That reality encourages resilience. You see it everywhere. A mother repairing clothing after sunset. A hunter sharpening tools before dawn. Children learning responsibilities at an early age. Everyone contributes. Everyone matters. Spiritual life forms another essential part of the Apache world. The natural environment is not viewed as separate from human existence. Mountains, rivers, animals, weather, and people occupy a shared reality filled with meaning. Certain places inspire particular respect. Certain ceremonies strengthen community bonds. Certain traditions help maintain balance between individuals and the wider world. The details vary among different Apache groups. Historians remain careful about oversimplifying these traditions because diversity exists across communities. In fact, scholars continue discussing how specific spiritual practices evolved over time and how regional differences influenced religious life. Evidence survives through oral traditions and historical accounts, yet some aspects remain difficult to reconstruct completely. The debate continues. the respect remains. As afternoon sunlight softens across the landscape, you observe another important aspect of Apache society: leadership. Contrary to popular stereotypes, authority often depends less upon coercion and more upon respect. Leaders earn influence through wisdom, experience, generosity, courage, and proven judgment. People follow because trust exists, not because force demands obedience. A respected individual may guide decisions during difficult circumstances, but cooperation remains essential. Communities function through relationships rather than rigid hierarchies. This approach proves remarkably adaptable. The environment rewards flexibility. Social structures do the same. The evening returns once more. A cool wind slides down from nearby mountains. Shadows lengthen across the valley floor. Families gather near fires as darkness settles over the land. You notice an elderly storyteller beginning another tale. Children move closer. Adults listen as well. No one seems rushed. The story carries memories from generations past. Perhaps some details have changed slightly over time. That happens in every culture. Yet the deeper lessons endure. You realize something important. The Apache world before European contact is not waiting for history to begin. History is already happening. Families are raising children. Communities are adapting. Leaders are making decisions. Traditions are evolving. Lives are being lived fully and meaningfully. Too often, later conflicts dominate popular memory. Yet those famous struggles emerge from a much older foundation. The strength displayed during future challenges develops here first. In centuries of adaptation, cooperation, and intimate knowledge of the land, the stars appear again overhead. The fire crackles softly. The mountains watch in silence, and the Apache world continues forward, confident in rhythms that have guided generations across the vast southwest. The stars slowly fade as dawn approaches. A pale grey light spreads across the horizon, revealing mountain ridges that seemed invisible only moments before. The air feels cool against your skin. Somewhere nearby, a small group is already awake. The day begins early. It often must. Life in the Apache world rewards those who move with purpose. You rise with the camp and notice how quietly everything unfolds. There is no wasted motion. A fire is tended. Equipment is checked. Food is prepared. Children help where they can. Experienced travelers study the weather and terrain before setting out. Movement is part of life, not an interruption to it. As you continue your journey through the centuries before European contact, one truth becomes increasingly clear. Apache communities become masters of mobility. The Southwest is vast. Distances are enormous. Water sources may lie many miles apart. The ability to travel efficiently becomes one of the most valuable skills a person can possess. You follow a group crossing rugged country between mountain ranges. The route appears difficult at first glance. Rocky slopes rise sharply from the valley floor. Dry washes twist through the landscape. Thorny vegetation covers sections of the trail. Yet the travelers move confidently. They know this country. Every ridge seems familiar. Every landmark carries meaning. You begin to understand that mobility is not simply physical movement. It is also knowledge. A person who understands terrain can travel farther, faster, and more safely than someone relying only on strength. A young hunter pauses beside a set of tracks pressed into damp soil. He studies them carefully. The marks reveal a story. An animal passed through recently. Its direction is clear, its speed can be estimated. Even its condition may be guessed from subtle clues. To an outsider, the ground appears ordinary. To a skilled observer, it speaks. Research discussed by scholars at Princeton University and the University of Arizona has emphasized the remarkable environmental awareness developed by indigenous communities in arid regions. Tracking, navigation, and landscape interpretation often reached levels that astonished later observers. You can easily see why. Every day becomes an exercise in observation. The sun climbs higher as the group continues forward. Heat begins rising from the earth. The scent of dry grass mingles with warm stone. Small insects hum among scattered plants. Hours pass, yet nobody appears anxious. Patience governs the journey. The destination matters, but so does the process of getting there. Apache survival depends upon flexibility. Conditions change constantly. A water source may shrink during drought, animal migrations shift. Weather patterns vary from year to year. Successful communities adapt. Rigid plans often fail. This lesson becomes deeply embedded within Apache culture. You stop beside a shaded spring hidden among rocks. Water trickles quietly into a small pool. The sound feels almost magical after hours spent crossing dry country. Such places are precious. Their locations are remembered carefully. Knowledge of reliable water sources can determine whether a journey succeeds or ends in hardship. A child kneels beside the spring and drinks. Nearby, an elder points toward distant mountains while explaining future travel routes. The lesson seems casual, yet it carries enormous value. One day that child may depend upon this information. One day another generation will learn the same lesson. The chain continues. As afternoon approaches, hunters move away from the main group. You follow at a respectful distance. They advance carefully through woodland where deer occasionally appear. No one speaks unnecessarily. The forest feels still. Pine needles soften footsteps beneath your feet. A faint scent of resin drifts through the air. The hunters remain alert without seeming tense. Their movements reflect years of experience. Every sound receives attention. Every shadow is evaluated. Then they stop. A deer appears briefly between trees. The moment is quick. The opportunity matters. Success today may provide food for multiple families. Hunting requires skill, patience, and cooperation. It also requires respect. Animals are not viewed merely as resources. Their importance to human survival creates a relationship shaped by necessity and gratitude. Many indigenous traditions throughout North America reflect this perspective. Apache communities are no exception. The hunt ends successfully. Relief spreads through the group, not celebration. Relief, because survival often depends upon consistent effort rather than dramatic victories. You continue onward as the seasons pass. Summer brings intense heat to lower elevations. Travelers adjust by seeking cooler terrain whenever possible. High mountain forests offer shade and relief. Streams run clearer in these upland regions. Game animals become easier to locate. The contrast is remarkable. Within a relatively short distance, environments change dramatically. Desert gives way to forest. Dry valleys become green mountains. Apache communities learn to use these variations advantageously. According to studies associated with Stanford University and the University of California, many indigenous groups in the Southwest practice sophisticated seasonal movement patterns that maximized available resources while reducing environmental pressure on any single location. The strategy proves effective. Generation after generation benefits, yet historians continue debating certain aspects of how individual Apache groups organize seasonal movements. Archaeological evidence provides valuable clues, but some details remain open to interpretation. Different regions likely followed different patterns. The discussion remains active. The broader picture remains clear. Adaptation creates resilience. As evening approaches once more, dark clouds gather over distant peaks. Thunder echoes faintly across the mountain. The smell of approaching rain fills the air. Everyone notices. Weather commands attention here. A storm can bring life-sustaining moisture. It can also create challenges. The first raindrops strike warm earth. A rich scent rises immediately. You pause to enjoy the moment. The land seems to breathe. Children laugh as the shower intensifies. Adults secure equipment and seek shelter where needed. Nobody appears surprised. Life in this environment teaches acceptance of changing conditions. The storm passes quickly. Sunlight returns. Water glistens across rocks and leaves. The world feels refreshed as darkness settles over camp. You reflect upon everything you have witnessed. Mobility is not simply movement from one place to another. It represents a complete way of understanding the world. Travel teaches, observation protects, knowledge accumulates. Flexibility strengthens communities. These qualities will become increasingly important in the centuries ahead. New challenges will eventually arrive from distant lands. Foreign empires will enter the Southwest, conflict and uncertainty will follow. But those future struggles remain beyond the horizon for now. Tonight, the Apache world rests beneath a sky filled with stars. Families gather around fires. Elders share stories. Hunters prepare for tomorrow. Children drift towards sleep. The mountain stands silent in the darkness. The land remains vast, and the people who know it best continue perfecting the skills that will one day make them among the most formidable survivors in North American history. The years continue to pass like slow-moving clouds over the mountains. Generations are born, grow older, and leave their wisdom behind. The rhythms of Apache life remain deeply connected to the land. Seasons guide movement. Families maintain traditions. Communities adapt to changing conditions with the quiet confidence developed through centuries of experience. Then, gradually, unfamiliar stories begin to spread. At first they sound distant, almost unbelievable. Travelers speak of strange newcomers appearing far to the south. These outsiders arrive wearing metal armor that flashes beneath the sun. They ride animals larger than deer. They carry unfamiliar tools and weapons. Their languages sound unlike anything previously heard in the region. The stories travel long before the people themselves. You sit beside a campfire as news moves through conversations. Nobody fully understands what these reports mean. Curiosity mixes with caution. Rumors often change during long journeys. Yet enough accounts begin to agree on certain details. Something new is happening, something significant. The first Europeans entering the broader Southwest arrive as representatives of the Spanish Empire. They are explorers, soldiers, missionaries, settlers, and adventurers. Their goals vary. Some seek wealth, others seek influence. Many hope to expand imperial authority into territories barely understood by distant officials. For Apache communities, these newcomers represent an entirely unfamiliar force. At first, encounters remain limited. The Southwest is immense. Distances still provide separation, yet separation rarely lasts forever. Historical records preserved by Spanish authorities, combined with modern research discussed by scholars at Yale University and the University of New Mexico, indicate that contact between indigenous peoples and Spanish expeditions developed gradually across different regions, rather than through a single dramatic event. The reality is complicated. Different communities experience contact differently. Some encounters remain peaceful, others Many begin with uncertainty. You imagine standing on a ridge overlooking a distant valley. Below, a small Spanish expedition moves slowly through unfamiliar terrain. Metal armor glitters in sunlight. Horses carry riders across country that Apache travelers know intimately. The sight must have been remarkable, perhaps even unsettling. For generations, the landscape has followed familiar patterns. Now new possibilities appear on the horizon. New opportunities emerge as well. Trade becomes one of the earliest forms of interaction. European goods attract attention because they offer practical advantages. Metal tools prove useful. Certain manufactured items become valuable additions to existing ways of life. Trade rarely transforms societies overnight. Instead, change arrives gradually. One exchange at a time, one relationship at a time. You watch as curiosity begins overcoming initial hesitation. Individuals from different worlds attempt communication despite language barriers. Gestures substitute for words. Observation becomes essential. Sometimes cooperation develops. Sometimes misunderstandings occur. Human nature remains remarkably consistent. A shared meal can create trust. A simple mistake can create tension. The outcomes vary. As decades pass, the number of Spanish settlements slowly increases. Missions appear in some regions. Military outposts establish a more permanent presence. Colonial officials attempt to extend influence into areas that Apache communities have long considered part of their world. the situation becomes increasingly complex. Neither side fully understands the other. Different assumptions shape expectations. Different experiences shape decisions. You notice how geography continues influencing events. The same mountains and deserts that once protected Apache communities still provide advantages. Travel remains difficult for outsiders unfamiliar with local conditions. Distance limits control. The land itself becomes a participant in history, a silent participant, yet an important one. A warm afternoon wind sweeps across a valley as you observe another meeting between Apache travelers and Spanish settlers. This time the conversation feels more cautious. Earlier curiosity remains, but new concerns have emerged. Competition occasionally develops over resources. Livestock wanders. Property disappears. Misunderstandings multiply. Small incidents create larger consequences. Nobody can yet predict where these tensions may lead. Research from historians associated with Harvard University and the University of California has emphasized that frontier interactions throughout colonial North America rarely followed simple patterns. Trade, cooperation, conflict, diplomacy, and cultural exchange often existed simultaneously. The Apache experience reflects this complexity. There is no single story. There are many stories. Some involve friendship, others involve violence, most involve uncertainty. You spend time among families discussing these developments. Elders evaluate changing circumstances carefully. Younger individuals show interest in unfamiliar goods. Leaders attempt to balance opportunities with risks. The challenge is substantial. How should a community respond when an entirely new world begins approaching its borders? No easy answer exists. Historians still debate the extent to which early contact transformed Apache society during specific periods. Some scholars emphasize gradual adaptation. Others highlight moments of rapid change. The evidence supports elements of both perspectives, depending upon region and circumstance. The discussion continues today. The people living through these events, however, cannot wait for future historians. They must make decisions in real time. As evening arrives, you notice a different atmosphere around the campfire. Conversations focus increasingly upon news from distant settlements. Travelers share reports of growing Spanish activity. Information becomes more valuable than ever. Knowledge provides preparation. Preparation improves survival. The principle remains unchanged. The stars emerge overhead. A familiar sky watches an unfamiliar chapter begin. You reflect upon how contact affects both sides. Apache communities are observing newcomers. Spanish settlers are also attempting to understand people whose knowledge of the Southwest far exceeds their own. Neither group possesses complete information. Both make assumptions. Both sometimes misunderstand. The result is a frontier shaped by constant negotiation. A child listening beside the fire cannot yet know how profoundly these developments will influence future generations. The world still feels largely familiar. Daily responsibilities continue. Families hunt, gather, travel, and celebrate as before. Yet subtle changes are underway. Trade routes expand. New goods circulate. Fresh concerns appear. History begins turning toward a different future. The mountains remain unchanged. The deserts remain vast. But human relationships across the Southwest are becoming more complicated with every passing year. You watch the fire settle into glowing coals. The scent of wood smoke drifts through the cool night air. Somewhere beyond the darkness, Spanish settlements continue growing. Somewhere beyond the horizon, additional encounters await. For now, neither side fully understands what lies ahead. But the first meetings have occurred. The first impressions have formed. And the long relationship between the Apache and the newcomers from across the ocean has quietly begun. The relationship between the Apache and the newcomers from distant lands continues to evolve. Seasons pass, settlements grow, trade expands, tensions appear and fade, only to return again in different forms. Across the Southwest, people on all sides are learning that history rarely moves in a straight line. One development, however, begins changing everything. It arrives on 4 legs, and it transforms the region forever. The horse, as dawn breaks over the desert. You watch sunlight spread across a broad valley. The air is cool for now, though the coming afternoon will bring heat. A small group gathers near the edge of camp. Their attention focuses on animals that would have seemed extraordinary only a few generations earlier. The horses stand quietly, strong, alert, powerful. At first, horses arrived with Spanish explorers and settlers. They were symbols of military strength, transportation, and prestige. Yet animals have a way of escaping human plans. Some horses wandered away, others were traded. Still others passed through networks of exchange that stretched across enormous distances. Gradually, indigenous communities throughout much of North America began acquiring them. The Apache were among those who recognized their value. The change was profound, perhaps more profound than anyone initially realized. Research discussed by scholars at the University of Oxford, Stanford University, and the University of New Mexico has emphasized that the spread of horses ranks among the most significant transformations in the history of indigenous North America. The impact touched travel, trade, hunting, warfare, communication, and daily life. You can see the difference immediately. A journey that once required days on foot can now be completed more quickly. People transport greater quantities of supplies. Communication between distant communities becomes easier. Mobility, already central to Apache life, reaches an entirely new level. A young rider guides a horse across open country. The movement appears effortless. Wind stirs dust behind them. The animal responds to subtle commands. Horse and rider seem almost connected. You sense why these animals become so important. The Apache are already skilled travelers. Horses amplify existing strengths rather than replacing them. Knowledge of terrain remains essential. Survival skills remain essential. Community cooperation remains essential. The horse becomes a tool, a remarkable tool, but still a tool. Throughout the Southwest, Apache communities adapt quickly. Horses improve hunting efficiency. Riders can cover greater distances while tracking game. They can reach seasonal resources more effectively. Trade networks expand farther than before. Opportunities increase. So do responsibilities. Horses require care. They require water. They require protection. A valuable horse can become one of a family's most important possessions. Maintaining healthy animals demands effort and attention. You spend time with several riders preparing for a long journey. They inspect equipment carefully. Saddles are adjusted, supplies are organized, every detail matters. The smell of leather fills the morning air. Hooves strike dry ground. A horse shakes its mane and snorts softly. The sounds feel ordinary now, yet only a few generations earlier they would have seemed astonishing. As horse culture develops, Apache influence across portions of the Southwest grows. Increased mobility creates strategic advantages. Communities can respond more quickly to changing circumstances. Information travels faster. Connections strengthen. The balance of power shifts. Not suddenly, but steadily. You notice that Spanish settlers also recognize this reality. Colonial authorities understand that horses enhance Apache capabilities. Some officials attempt to regulate trade. Others seek alliances. Military leaders evaluate changing conditions with concern. The frontier becomes more dynamic, more unpredictable, more interconnected. According to research from historians at Harvard University and the University of California, horses often altered relationships among indigenous groups as well as relationships with colonial powers. Access to horses could influence trade, diplomacy, and competition throughout large regions. The Apache world is no exception. Every major innovation creates new possibilities. It also creates new challenges. You ride through open grassland beneath a brilliant blue sky. The landscape seems endless. Distant mountains shimmer in the heat. A group of riders moves confidently across terrain that would exhaust most travelers on foot. The freedom feels extraordinary, yet freedom is never absolute. Competition grows alongside opportunity. As horses become more common, livestock raids increase throughout parts of the Southwest. Horses themselves become valuable targets. Disputes emerge between different communities and settlements. What one group considers recovery of resources, another may view as theft. Perspective matters. History often depends upon it. The same event can appear entirely different depending on who tells the story. You hear discussions around evening fires. Some people focus on trade opportunities, others worry about increasing tensions. Leaders attempt to navigate a changing world where traditional knowledge must be combined with new realities. Their task is not simple. The pace of change is accelerating. The horse is only one part of that change, yet it remains one of the most visible. A cool breeze arrives after sunset. Campfires flicker against the darkness. Nearby horses graze quietly while their owners rest. The animals have become woven into daily life so thoroughly that it is difficult to imagine the Southwest without them. Children grow up learning riding skills. Travel plans assume their presence. Economic relationships adapt accordingly. The transformation feels complete, yet historians continue debating exactly how rapidly horse culture spread among different Apache groups. Archaeological evidence, oral traditions, and colonial records provide valuable information, but some timelines remain subjects of scholarly discussion. The details vary. The broader impact does not. Few historians question the significance of the change itself. As the night deepens, you reflect upon what the horse represents. It is not merely an animal, it symbolizes adaptation. The Apache did not passively experience history, they actively responded to it. They evaluated new opportunities and incorporated useful innovations into existing ways of life. That flexibility has always been one of their greatest strengths. You have seen it before, in movement across difficult terrain, in environment, mental knowledge, in community cooperation. Now you see it again. The stars shine brightly overhead. Horses shift occasionally in the darkness. The scent of dry grass mixes with fading wood smoke. Somewhere beyond the horizon, colonial settlements continue expanding. New challenges are approaching. But tonight, the Apache ride confidently through a changing world. The horse has altered the rhythm of life. The land remains vast. The future remains uncertain. Yet the people who know this country best are adapting once again, preparing themselves for a century that will bring opportunity, conflict, and transformation on a scale few could yet imagine. The horse changes the rhythm of life, but it does not bring peace. As years pass, the Southwest becomes a place where opportunity and tension grow side by side. Trade continues. Families travel familiar routes. Communities adapt to changing circumstances. Yet another reality is becoming increasingly difficult to avoid. The frontier is hardening. What began as occasional contact between Apache communities and Spanish settlements is slowly evolving into something more complicated. More settlers arrive. More livestock spreads across the land. More military outposts appear in strategic locations. Each new arrival changes the balance slightly. Each new decision creates consequences. You find yourself standing on a ridge at sunrise. Below, a narrow valley stretches toward distant mountains. Thin streams of smoke rise from scattered camps. Far away, a small colonial settlement clings to the landscape. The distance between them seems vast. Sometimes it is not vast enough. The Apache and Spanish do not exist in separate worlds anymore. Their lives increasingly intersect. Trade remains important. Diplomacy remains important. But misunderstandings and competition also become more frequent. Livestock creates one source of conflict. Spanish settlers introduce large numbers of cattle, sheep, and horses into regions where such animals were previously unknown. Herds require grazing land and water. Their presence alters local environments. They also become valuable resources. Different communities view ownership differently. Different legal systems exist. Different expectations collide. What appears justified from one perspective may seem unacceptable from another. You begin to understand why frontier disputes often prove so difficult to resolve. There is rarely a single cause. There are layers: a missing horse, a damaged field, an insult, a misunderstanding, a broken promise. Small incidents can grow larger. A cool morning wind moves through a camp as several Apache leaders discuss recent events. Their expressions remain calm, but concern is visible. News has arrived from neighboring regions. Another dispute has occurred. Another confrontation threatens broader consequences. The pattern is becoming familiar, yet nobody welcomes it. Contrary to later stereotypes, warfare is not a constant state of existence. Conflict brings risks. It disrupts families. It creates uncertainty. Most communities prefer stability when stability is possible. The problem is that stability becomes harder to maintain. Research discussed by historians from Yale University and the University of Arizona suggests that frontier violence in colonial North America often developed through cycles of retaliation. One attack might trigger another. One grievance could produce several more. The process becomes self-sustaining. People remember losses. Communities seek justice. The cycle continues. You ride across open country with a group of travelers carrying messages between distant settlements and camps. Communication matters more than ever. Accurate information can prevent conflict. False information can encourage it. The challenge is obvious. Rumors travel quickly. Facts travel more slowly. A rider reports an incident involving stolen livestock. Another claims the story has been exaggerated. A third insists important details are missing. Who is correct? Perhaps parts of every account contain truth. Perhaps none do completely. The uncertainty itself becomes dangerous. As decades pass, Spanish authorities attempt various strategies. Some officials favor military responses. Others emphasize negotiation and diplomacy. Certain leaders pursue alliances with indigenous groups. Others rely more heavily upon force. Policies change frequently. Results vary. Success proves temporary. The Southwest refuses simple solutions. You arrive at a settlement where trade is underway. Apache travelers exchange goods with local residents. Conversations occur in multiple languages. Laughter occasionally breaks through the noise. Moments like this matter. They remind you that cooperation never disappears entirely. Even during periods of tension, people continue finding reasons to work together. History is rarely divided neatly between peace and war. Both often exist simultaneously. The scent of fresh bread drifts from one building. Nearby, horses stamp their hooves impatiently. Children play beneath the afternoon sun. For a moment, everything feels normal. Then news arrives from another frontier district. A raid. Several injuries. Property lost. The mood shifts immediately. You can almost feel the tension spreading. One report changes dozens of conversation. Fear travels quickly. Fear always has. Historical records preserved in colonial archives reveal that frontier communities often lived with a constant awareness of uncertainty. Settlers worried about attacks. Apache communities worried about military expeditions. Trust remained fragile, and fragile trust breaks easily. You spend an evening beside a fire listening to older individuals discuss changing conditions. Their memories stretch back decades. They remember earlier years when contact remained less frequent. The world feels different now. Busier, more crowded, less predictable. A respected elder pauses before speaking. The silence lasts several seconds. Everyone listens. Experience has taught him something important. When two worlds compete for the same space, misunderstandings become inevitable. His words linger in the night air. Not because they are dramatic, because they are true. Meanwhile, younger generations grow up knowing only this frontier reality. They inherit tensions created long before they were born. They also inherit responsibilities. Families still need food. Communities still need protection. Life continues despite uncertainty. A dusty road winds toward the horizon beneath fading sunlight. Riders disappear into the distance carrying news, instruction, and hopes for peaceful outcomes. Sometimes those hopes succeed, sometimes they do not. Historians continue debating whether greater cooperation could have prevented certain conflicts during this period. Some scholars emphasize missed diplomatic opportunities. Others argue that competing interests made a long-term peace difficult to sustain. No clear agreement survives. The debate reflects the complexity of the era. Simple explanations rarely satisfy. As darkness settles over the southwest, campfires appear across valleys and hillsides. Settlers gather behind defensive walls. Apache families gather beneath familiar stars. Both communities worry about tomorrow. Both communities hope for security. Both communities tell stories around evening fires. The similarities are easy to overlook, yet they exist. You sit quietly beneath the night sky and reflect upon how quickly relationships can change. Trade creates connections. Competition creates tensions. Fear amplifies both. The frontier is becoming a place where cooperation and conflict coexist uneasily, and the balance grows more fragile with each passing year. The mountains remain silent. The deserts remain vast, but the southwest is entering a new age, one in which survival will depend not only upon understanding the land, but also upon navigating increasingly complicated relationships between peoples whose futures are becoming impossible to separate. The frontier grows more complicated with every passing year, yet life continues far beyond the disputes that occupy official reports and military correspondence. Most Apache families do not spend every day thinking about conflict. They think about children, food, weather, responsibilities, ceremonies, and the countless ordinary moments that shape human existence. Those quieter moments matter. They reveal the heart of Apache society. As dawn spreads across a mountain valley, you awaken to the scent of wood smoke drifting through cool air. A nearby stream murmurs softly among stones polished by centuries of flowing water. The camp is already stirring. Some people prepare food, others check horses. Children rub sleep from their eyes and begin another day. Life moves forward, as it always has. You spend time among several families and begin to notice how deeply relationships influence daily life. Apache communities are built upon networks of kinship, trust, and shared responsibility. Individuals matter, but they rarely stand alone. Family forms the foundation, not only parents and children, a broader circle. Grandparents, cousins, aunts, uncles, and relatives connected through generations all contribute to community life. Knowledge flows through these relationships. A grandmother teaches practical skills. A hunter shares lessons about tracking. An elder explains the meaning of a ceremony. Children absorb information constantly. The process appears natural, yet it is remarkably effective. You watch a young girl learning how to prepare gathered plants for food. Her teacher corrects mistakes gently. Patience defines the lesson. Nobody seems hurried. The knowledge being passed down has survived generations. It deserves care. Research discussed by scholars at the University of Chicago and Stanford University highlights the importance of family networks within many indigenous societies. Such relationships often provided economic support, cultural continuity, and social stability during periods of change. The Apache experience reflects these strengths. Community creates resilience. Resilience supports survival. As morning advances, you note another important feature of Apache life: leadership. Popular imagination often pictures authority as something imposed from above. The reality is more subtle. Respect must be earned. A leader gains influence through wisdom, courage, generosity, and sound judgment. People listen because they trust, not because they fear. A respected individual sits beneath the shade of a large tree while community members gather nearby. Several matters require discussion. Travel routes need consideration. News from neighboring regions must be evaluated. Concerns are raised. Opinions are shared. The conversation unfolds carefully. Voices remain calm. Everyone understands the importance of the decisions. Leadership is not simply about giving orders. It is about helping people navigate uncertainty. You sense the weight of that responsibility. The southwest is changing. Contact with colonial settlements continues increasing. New opportunities and dangers appear regularly. Communities need leaders capable of adapting without losing sight of traditional values. That balance is never easy. A warm afternoon breeze carries the scent of pine from higher elevations. Horses graze nearby, children play along the edge of camp while adults attend to daily responsibilities. The atmosphere feels peaceful. Yet beneath the surface lies constant preparation. Apache communities value self-reliance. Individuals are expected to contribute according to their abilities. Skills are respected because skills support everyone. You watch a craftsman repairing equipment damaged during recent travel. His hands move confidently. Years of experience guide each motion. The finished work may appear ordinary, but it represents countless hours of practice. Excellence often hides in ordinary tasks. The same principle applies to survival. People who prepare carefully usually endure challenges more effectively. As evening approaches, attention gradually shifts towards spiritual life. The setting sun paints distant mountains in shades of gold and red. Shadows lengthen across the valley floor. The land feels soothed, not because of monuments, because of connection. Apache spiritual traditions vary among different communities. Yet certain themes remain important. The natural world is alive with meaning. Human beings exist within larger relationships that deserve respect. Ceremonies help maintain balance and strengthen bonds between individuals, families, and communities. You sit quietly during a gathering where songs and traditions connect participants to generations that came before them. The atmosphere is calm, reflective, deeply human. No grand temple stands nearby. No towering structure dominates the landscape. The ceremony derives its power from shared belief and shared experience. According to research from Yale University and the University of New Mexico, many indigenous traditions in the Southwest emphasized harmony, reciprocity, and the maintenance of relationships between people and the environment. Those principles feel visible here, not as abstract ideas, as realities. The firelight flickers across attentive faces. Elders remember earlier generations. Younger listeners absorb lessons they will eventually pass onward. The chain remains unbroken. For now, historians continue discussing how spiritual practices evolved across different Apache groups over time. Oral traditions preserve valuable insights, yet regional variations and centuries of change make certain details difficult to reconstruct fully. Some questions remain open. Many answers survive. The broader significance is unmistakable. Spiritual life helps communities endure. As darkness settles across the valley, another aspect of Apache culture becomes increasingly clear: honor. Not honor in the theatrical sense often portrayed by outsiders. A quieter version. Honor expressed through responsibility, through reliability, through courage when courage becomes necessary. A person's reputation matters. Trust matters. Relationships matter. Communities remember how individuals behave during difficult times. You hear stories shared around evening fires. Some celebrate bravery, others celebrate generosity, a few praise wisdom. Interestingly, the qualities admired most often involve helping others rather than seeking personal glory. That observation lingers in your mind. History sometimes focuses on famous leaders and dramatic events. Daily life reveals different priorities. The stars emerge one by one overhead. A cool wind slides down from the mountains. The smell of smoke and earth fills the night air. Nearby, a child falls asleep while listening to an elder's story. The scene feels timeless, yet change is approaching. The colonial frontier continues expanding. Political forces beyond the mountains continue shifting. New challenges are already forming beyond the horizon. Apache communities cannot stop those developments, but they can prepare, and preparation begins here, within families, within traditions, within values passed carefully from one generation to the next. You look around the camp one final time before sleep. The fire glows softly. Horses stand quietly in the darkness. Voices fade into silence. The strength that will one day allow Apache leaders to resist powerful empires is being nurtured here, not only through warfare or survival skills, but through family bonds, spiritual traditions, earned leadership, and a deep commitment to community. Those foundations will soon be tested. very soon. Those foundations soon faced a world that is changing faster than ever before. The camp sleeps beneath familiar stars. Yet beyond the mountains, powerful events are unfolding. Empires rise, governments weaken, borders shift on maps drawn by distant officials who have never walked the deserts and forests of the Southwest. The Apache do not control these events, neither do most of the settlers living along the frontier, but everyone will feel the consequences. As dawn arrives, you find yourself overlooking a broad landscape stretching toward the southern horizon. Thin clouds drift across a pale sky. The air carries the scent of damp earth left behind by a recent rain. The world appears peaceful. History rarely announces its arrival. It simply appears, one change at a time, for generations. Spain has claimed vast territories across North America, yet maintaining control over distant frontiers is difficult. Communication takes months. Supplies travel slowly. Officials rotate through positions. Local realities often differ dramatically from instructions written far away. The empire is large. Perhaps too large. You notice growing uncertainty within many frontier settlements. Some communities prosper, others struggle. Military resources remain limited. Economic pressures increase. Political debates ripple through colonial society. Most Apache families know little about these distant discussions. What they notice are practical effects. Changes in trade, changes in military activity, changes in the behavior of neighboring settlements. Those signals matter far more than official proclamations. Research discussed by scholars at Oxford University and Harvard University has emphasized that frontier regions often experienced political transitions differently from major cities. Events that seem decisive in capitals sometimes unfolded gradually across distant territories. The Southwest illustrates this perfectly. For many people living here, change arrives as a slow tide rather than a sudden wave. You spend several days traveling between communities. News spreads through conversations, travelers and traders. Reports arrive regarding instability within Spanish authority. Rumors circulate about conflicts far to the south. Some reports are accurate, others are exaggerated. Nobody knows exactly what the future holds. The uncertainty itself becomes important. A respected Apache leader listens carefully as visitors share recent information. He asks questions, he considers possibilities. His expression remains thoughtful. Experience has taught him caution. The frontier rewards patience. Impulsive decisions often create unnecessary problems. As years pass, the Spanish Empire's grip on its northern territories weakens. Local officials face increasing challenges. Resources remain stretched thin. The ability to project authority across enormous distances declines. Yet weakened control does not necessarily create peace. Sometimes it creates the opposite. Power vacuums attract new ambitions. You ride through a valley where cottonwood trees line a narrow stream. Their leaves rustle softly in the breeze. The sound is soothing. It almost masks the growing tension beneath regional politics. Almost. Communities throughout the Southwest begin adjusting to new realities. Trade relationships shift, military priorities change, old assumptions no longer seem reliable. The familiar world feels less certain. People notice. A woman preparing food beside a fire may not know the details of international politics, but she recognizes when travel routes become less predictable. A hunter may never read an official document, yet he understands when frontier conditions change. Practical knowledge remains essential, perhaps more essential than ever. According to historians from Yale University and the University of Chicago, frontier societies frequently develop their own responses to political instability, adapting more quickly than distant governments expected. The Apache demonstrate this adaptability repeatedly. It has become one of their defining strengths. You observe growing efforts to maintain flexibility. Communities avoid becoming dependent upon any single relationship. Leaders evaluate multiple options. Families continue teaching survival skills that remain valuable regardless of political developments. The strategy makes sense. Governments come and go. The land remains. A warm afternoon settles across the desert. Heat shimmers above the ground. In the distance, riders approach carrying news from settlements farther south. Their arrival draws attention immediately. News is valuable. News may reveal opportunities. News may reveal dangers. Sometimes both. The riders describe increasing unrest within territories controlled by Spain. The details vary from account to account, but one conclusion seems unavoidable. A major transformation is underway. No one knows how long it will take. No one knows exactly what it will produce. But change is coming. Historians still debate how fully frontier communities understood the significance of these developments while they were occurring. Some evidence suggests that many people recognized important changes immediately. Other evidence indicates that the long-term consequences became clear only gradually. Both interpretations likely contain truth. History often appears obvious only in retrospect. Living through it feels different, much different. As evening approaches, campfires illuminate the gathering darkness. Travelers exchange stories. Leaders discuss possibilities. Families listen carefully. The atmosphere is thoughtful rather than fearful. The Apache have survived uncertainty before, many times. They understand that adaptation is often more useful than prediction. The scent of wood smoke drifts upward into the cool night air. Stars emerge above the mountains. Somewhere in the darkness, an owl calls briefly before falling silent. You sit beside the fire and reflect upon the moment. The Spanish Empire is weakening. A new political order is beginning to form. The transition will reshape the Southwest. Yet for now, the outcome remains hidden beyond the horizon. Apache communities continue their daily lives. Children learn from elders. Hunters travel familiar routes. Ceremonies maintain important traditions. Families care for one another. The foundations remain strong. Those foundations will soon face a different government, different policies, and different challenges. But tonight, the old empire still lingers. The new era has not fully arrived. The Southwest stands between worlds, between past and void, between certainty and uncertainty, and as the fire burns lower beneath a sky crowded with stars, you can almost sense history holding its breath before the next great chapter begins. History does not hold its breath for long. The changes that have been gathering beyond the horizon finally begin reshaping the Southwest. The authority of Spain fades. A new nation emerges from years of struggle and political upheaval. What had once been a distant imperial frontier now becomes part of an independent Mexico. For Apache communities, the landscape remains the mountains do not move. The rivers follow familiar paths. The desert still stretches beneath endless skies. Yet political change rarely stays confined to government offices. Sooner or later, it reaches everyone. The morning sun rises over a broad valley as you travel through country that Apache families have known for generations. A cool breeze carries the scent of sage and dust. Birds call from nearby trees. The land feels unchanged. Human relationships are another matter. Mexican officials inherit enormous territories across northern regions. They also inherit long-standing challenges. Frontier settlements remain vulnerable. Communication across vast distances remains difficult. Resources remain limited. The problems that frustrated Spanish authorities do not disappear. They simply acquire new names. You begin hearing conversations among travelers discussing recent developments. Some express cautious optimism. Others remain skeptical. Most people are focused on practical concerns rather than political theory. Will trade continue? Will travel remain safe? Will agreements be honored? These questions matter far more than distant speeches. Research discussed by scholars at Stanford University and Yale University suggests that the transition from Spanish to Mexican rule created significant uncertainty throughout frontier regions. Local communities often faced rapidly changing conditions while attempting to maintain stability. The Apache experience reflects this reality. Political transformation brings new possibilities. It also brings new tension. You ride toward a settlement where residents are preparing for another difficult season. Livestock must be protected. Crops require attention, supplies remain limited. Life on the frontier is demanding for everyone. That reality creates pressure. Pressure influences decisions, and decisions influence history. Relations between Apache communities and Mexican settlements become increasingly strained in many regions. Competition over resources intensifies. Raids and retaliatory actions become more frequent. Fear spreads through frontier districts. The cycle begins feeding itself. One attack prompts another. One loss inspires revenge. Trust becomes harder to maintain. You sit beside a campfire listening to discussions among Apache leaders. Reports have arrived from neighboring areas. Violence has occurred again. Families have suffered losses. Emotions run deep. Nobody speaks lightly about these events. The consequences are real. A young man listens quietly while older individuals discuss possible responses. Their expressions reveal exhaustion as much as anger. Years of instability wear upon communities. Even the strongest people tire eventually. A faint wind rustles through nearby trees. Sparks drift upward from the fire. The night feels calm despite the concerns being discussed. The contrast is striking. Nature remains indifferent. Human beings carry the burden. As conflict spreads, Mexican authorities attempt various solutions. Some officials pursue diplomacy. Others emphasize military campaigns. Certain leaders hope negotiations can reduce violence. Others believe force offers the only answer. Results vary. Success proves temporary. The frontier remains stubbornly complex. Historical records examined by the researchers from Harvard University and the University of Arizona indicate that northern Mexico experienced persistent instability during this period. Raiding, military expeditions, economic hardship, and political uncertainty combined to create difficult conditions throughout many regions. The impact reaches far beyond battlefields. Families adapt their routines. Travel becomes riskier. Communities devote increasing energy to security. The atmosphere changes. You notice this transformation during everyday moments. A trader plans routes more carefully. A parent worries when relatives travel long distances. A settlement strengthens defenses. An Apache camp adjusts movement patterns. Small decisions reveal larger realities. The conflict is shaping behavior. Not all interactions involve hostility. Trade continues in some areas. Personal relationships sometimes cross cultural boundaries. Individual acts of cooperation still occur. Those moments matter. They remind you that history is rarely defined entirely by conflict. Yet conflict increasingly dominates attention, and attention shapes memory. You spend several days traveling through mountainous country where Apache groups maintain strong knowledge of terrain. The advantages are obvious. Narrow passes, hidden water sources, and remote valleys provide opportunities for movement that outsiders often struggle to match. The land remains an ally, perhaps the greatest ally. Generations of experience have created expertise that cannot be learned quickly. You watch a small group cross difficult terrain with remarkable efficiency. They move confidently through country that would challenge most travelers. Every ridge feels familiar. Every landmark carries meaning. This knowledge becomes increasingly valuable as military pressures grow. Historians continue debating the relative importance of different causes behind escalating conflict during this period. Some emphasize economic pressures. Others focus on political instability or frontier expansion. Most agree that multiple factors interacted simultaneously. No single explanation is sufficient. The reality is more complicated. History usually is. As autumn approaches, cooler air begins descending from higher elevations. The heat softens. Long shadows stretch across the landscape during late afternoon. The season feels reflective. Communities take stock of recent events. Losses are remembered. Lessons are discussed. Plans are adjusted. A respected elder speaks quietly beside a fire one evening. His voice carries the weight of experience. He has witnessed years of change. He remembers earlier periods. He understands how quickly circumstances can shift. His advice is simple: stay adaptable. The principle has guided Apache communities for generations. It remains valuable now. perhaps more valuable than ever. The stars emerge overhead. Horses stand quietly beyond the glow of the fire. The smell of wood smoke mingles with cool evening air. You look around and realize that the Southwest has entered a new era of uncertainty. The old Spanish world has faded. The Mexican frontier struggles with challenges that seem to multiply rather than disappear. Apache communities face increasing pressure, yet they remain resilient. They remain mobile. They remain deeply connected to the land that has sustained them for centuries. The coming decades will bring even greater changes. Another powerful nation is approaching from the east. Another transformation waits beyond the horizon. For now, however, the Apache and Mexico remain locked within a difficult relationship shaped by conflict, adaptation, survival, and endurance. The story is far from over. In many ways, it's only beginning. The story is only beginning because another force is already moving toward the southwest. Far beyond the deserts and mountains, the United States is expanding. New settlements appear across the continent. Roads lengthen. Rivers carry increasing traffic. Politicians debate borders and territory. Soldiers march into regions that many Americans have never seen. The movement feels relentless. A nation is growing, and growth creates consequences. As dawn breaks across Apache country, you stand beside a rocky overlook. Below, a broad valley stretches towards distant peaks painted gold by the rising sun. Cool air brushes against your face. The landscape appears eternal. Yet human history is accelerating. News arrives gradually at first. Travelers bring reports from the east. Traders describe growing American settlements. Stories circulate about new migrants moving toward Western territories. The reports seem distant. Then they become less distant. Then they become impossible to ignore. The United States and Mexico enter conflict during the middle of the 19th century. When the war ends, vast territories change hands. Land that had once been governed by Spain and then Mexico now falls under American authority. On maps, the change appears sudden. On the ground, reality is more complicated. The mountains do not recognize treaties. The rivers do not acknowledge borders. Apache communities continue living in homelands that now exist within a new political framework created without their participation. You can sense the significance immediately. Everything is changing again. Research discussed by historians at Harvard University and Stanford University has emphasized that the transfer of northern Mexican territories to the United States dramatically altered relationships across the Southwest. New governments brought new priorities, new settlements, and new military strategies. For Apache communities, uncertainty grows. They have dealt with Spanish authorities. They have dealt with Mexican authorities. Now they must understand American authorities. Another set of leaders, another set of expectations, another set of promises. A rider arrives at camp carrying recent news. Several elders gather to listen. Their expressions remain calm, but attention sharpens. Experience has taught them something valuable. Whenever governments all change, communities must pay close attention. The details matter. The future often hides inside details. You travel through a region where American surveyors have begun mapping territory. Men carrying instruments move carefully across the landscape. They record measurements. They draw lines. They create documents intended to define ownership and control. The process appears orderly. Yet you cannot help noticing a fundamental difference. To the surveyors, the land is being measured. To the Apache, the land is being lived. The contrast shapes much of what follows. American officials view the Southwest through one set of assumptions. Apache communities view it through another. Neither perspective disappears simply because a treaty has been signed. As more settlers arrive, pressure increases. Wagon trains cross previously remote regions. Mining ventures seek opportunities. Ranches expand. Towns appear where little existed before. The population grows steadily. Resources become more contested. Tension multiply. You pass through an American settlement bustling with activity. Hammers strike wood. Wagons creak along dusty streets. Merchants discuss business opportunities. Optimism fills the air. Many newcomers see possibility everywhere. They believe the future belongs to them. Few stop to consider how their arrival affects people already living in the region. The oversight is common. History is full of such moments. According to research from Yale University and the University of California, westward expansion during the 19th century often produced competing visions of a land use and ownership. These differences created friction long before violence occurred. You can feel that friction building, not exploding. Building. A military officer studies maps inside a frontier post. His assignment appears straightforward on paper. Maintain order, protect settlements, support government policy. Reality proves far more difficult. The Southwest refuses simplicity. Distances remain enormous. Terrain remains challenging. Information remains incomplete. Every decision carries risks. The officer is not alone in facing uncertainty. Apache leaders face it as well. A respected leader listens carefully as reports arrive from multiple directions. Settlers are increasing in number. Military patrols appear more frequently. Travel routes are changing. He considers the information quietly. Patience remains one of his strengths. The ability to observe before acting has served his people well. A hot afternoon settles across the desert. Heat shimmers above distant rocks. The smell of dust hangs in the air. Somewhere nearby, horses drink from a narrow stream. The scene feels peaceful, yet beneath the surface, larger forces continue moving. American expansion is not merely a political event. It is a demographic event. More people arrive every year, more settlements appear, more infrastructure develops. The pace of change surprises many observers. Historians still debate whether meaningful coexistence was possible during certain moments of this period. Some scholars point to missed diplomatic opportunities. Others argue that competing goals made lasting accommodation increasingly difficult. The discussion remains active. The people living through these events do not enjoy the luxury of hindsight. They must respond as circumstances unfold. As evening approaches, the sky turns shades of orange and purple. Campfires begin appearing across the landscape. Families prepare meals. Children play, horses graze quietly. Daily life continues. It always does. Even during major historical transformations, you sit beside a fire listening to conversations about the future. Nobody can predict exactly what lies ahead. Yet most people sense that the arrival of the United States represents more than another administrative change. The scale feels different. The momentum feels different. The pressure feels different. The Apache have faced challenges before. They have adapted repeatedly. Their history is filled with examples of resilience. Those qualities will soon be tested more severely than ever. The stars emerge overhead. The mountains stand dark against the night sky. A cool breeze moves through camp, carrying the scent of smoke and dry earth. Somewhere beyond the horizon, additional settlers are already traveling westward. Additional soldiers are already receiving orders. Additional decisions are already being made. The Southwest is entering a new chapter. A powerful nation has arrived. And the long struggle between Apache communities in the United States is about to begin. The long struggle does not begin all at once. There is no single morning when every person across the Southwest awakens and realizes that a new era has arrived. Instead, the change unfolds gradually, through 1,000 small encounters, misunderstandings, negotiations, and confrontations. History often works that way, quietly at first. Then all at once, the sun rises over a rugged landscape of mesas, valleys, and distant mountains. Cool morning air carries the scent of damp earth from a recent storm. You stand beside a narrow trail where travelers have passed for generations. The path remains familiar. The world around it does not. American settlements continue expanding. New roads appear. Military posts multiply across strategic locations. Wagon traffic increases. Areas once visited only occasionally now experience regular movement. The Apache notice everything. They always have. Observation remains one of their greatest strengths. You travel with a small group crossing mountainous terrain. The riders move confidently through country they know intimately. Every ridge offers a vantage point. Every valley contains information. Knowledge remains power, especially now. Reports arrive constantly. A new settlement has appeared. Soldiers have established another outpost. Travelers are using previously quiet routes. The pattern is unmistakable. The American presence is becoming permanent. Research discussed by scholars at the University of Chicago and Stanford University emphasizes that military forts served not only defensive functions during westward expansion, but also acted as symbols of governmental authority and territorial control. To many American officials, forts represent order. To many Apache communities, they signal intrusion. Perspective shapes interpretation. You approach one of these frontier forts during the afternoon. The structure rises from the landscape with practical simplicity. Wooden buildings stand within defensive walls. Soldiers move about performing daily duties. Horses occupy nearby corrals. The scene feels busy, organized, purposeful. Yet beneath the routine lies uncertainty. The soldiers are far from home. Many know little about the people whose lands surround them. Many Apache know little about the individual soldiers. Both groups carry assumptions. Both groups carry fears. The result is a relationship filled with tension, not constant hostility. Tension, an important distinction. You spend several days observing interactions along the frontier. Some meetings remain peaceful. Trade occurs, information is exchanged, agreements are discussed. Other encounters prove less successful. A misunderstanding escalates. A promise is questioned. A rumor spreads. Trust weakens. The cycle repeats. According to historical records examined by researchers at Yale University and Harvard University, frontier relations during this period often shifted rapidly between cooperation and conflict. Alliances could form and dissolve quickly depending upon local circumstances. The Apache world is adapting once again. Adaptation has become a necessity. A young Apache rider pauses atop a ridge overlooking a distant settlement. He studies the scene carefully. Smoke rises from chimneys, wagons move along roads, construction continues, the settlement is growing. That fact cannot be ignored. Each new building represents more than lumber and nails. It represents permanence. You can almost feel the implication settling across the landscape. The challenge facing Apache leaders becomes increasingly difficult. How should communities respond to a growing population backed by a powerful nation? Resistance carries risks. Accommodation carries risks. Inaction carries risks as well. There are no easy choices, only difficult ones. A respected leader sits quietly beside a fire after sunset. Several younger men seek his advice. Their questions reflect uncertainty. The world they inherited is changing rapidly. He listens more than he speaks. Wisdom often begins there. When he finally responds, his words emphasize patience, observation, and unity. Rash actions may satisfy emotions temporarily. Long-term survival requires something more. The lesson feels important. It will remain important as military activity increases. American officials attempt various policies. Some seek negotiated agreements. Others favor stronger military measures. Different commanders pursue different approaches. Consistency proves elusive. One officer may support diplomacy. His replacement may prefer force. Communities must constantly adjust. The uncertainty creates frustration on all sides. A hot wind sweeps across the desert one afternoon, carrying dust high into the air. Visibility decreases. The landscape becomes hazy and distant. The weather seems symbolic. The future is difficult to see clearly, yet people must move forward anyway. You encounter families preparing to relocate temporarily toward more secure areas. The decision is practical rather than dramatic. Conditions have become unpredictable. Adjustments are necessary. Children help gather supplies. Parents organize equipment. Elders offer guidance. The scene reminds you of something fundamental. History is not experienced primarily by famous leaders. It is experienced by ordinary people, families, communities, individuals trying to navigate uncertain circumstances. Research from the University of California and Princeton University highlights how indigenous communities frequently demonstrated remarkable resilience during periods of disruption by maintaining social networks. Mobility and cultural continuity. You see those qualities everywhere. They are not abstract concepts. They are daily practices. As autumn approaches, cooler temperatures begin returning to higher elevations. Golden light spreads across the mountains during late afternoon. The beauty of the landscape remains breathtaking. The beauty persists despite conflict, perhaps because of it. Human struggles come and go. The mountains endure. Historians continued debating whether certain diplomatic opportunities during this period might have produced different outcomes. Some argue that mutual misunderstandings prevented more successful negotiations. Others believe structural pressures made prolonged peace increasingly difficult. The debate remains unresolved. The people living through these events rarely have the luxury of certainty. They act with incomplete information, just as we all do. Night settles over the southwest. Campfires glow across valleys and hillsides. Somewhere, soldiers write letters home. Somewhere else, Apache families gather around evening meals. Both groups think about loved ones. Both groups worry about tomorrow. Both groups hope for security. The similarities are easy to miss when conflict dominates attention, yet they remain real. You sit beside the fire and watch sparks drift toward the stars. The air has grown cooler. The scent of wood smoke lingers pleasantly. The frontier is changing faster now. American expansion continues. Military pressure increases. Apache communities adapt as they always have. But adaptation is becoming more difficult. The coming years will bring leaders whose names echo through history. They will face decisions that shape the future of entire communities. For now, however, the struggle remains unfinished. The outcome remains uncertain, and beneath the vast southwestern ski, a resilient people continue searching for a path through a world transforming around them. The resilient people searching for a path through a changing world soon find themselves guided by one of the most respected leaders in Apache history. His name is Cochise, long before his name becomes known throughout the United States. He is already recognized among his own people as a capable leader. He is not famous because of grand speeches. He is not famous because he seeks attention. He earns respect through judgment, through courage, through experience. The qualities matter deeply. The southwest of the mid-19th century is becoming increasingly unstable. Settlements expand, military activity increases, trust remains fragile, communities face difficult choices with growing frequency. In such times, leadership becomes invaluable. A cool morning settles over the mountains of southeastern Arizona. Pine trees sway gently beneath a pale blue sky. The scent of wood and earth fills the air. You travel through country that Cochise knows intimately. Every ridge, every canyon, every hidden spring. The landscape is both homeland and ally. Generations of Apache families have moved through these mountains. They understand the terrain in ways outsiders rarely can. This knowledge provides security, but it also creates responsibility. Protecting the people requires understanding the land. Cochise understands both. Research discussed by historians at Harvard University and the University of Arizona describes Cochise as one of the most influential Apache leaders during a period of profound transformation and conflict. His reputation extended well beyond his own community. You begin to see why. He listens carefully. He observes patiently. He acts deliberately. These qualities become increasingly important as tensions rise. For a time, relationships between Apache groups and American authorities remain complicated but manageable. There are disagreements, there are concerns, yet there are also efforts at communication. Then a single incident helps change everything. Accounts differ regarding certain details, and historians continue debating aspects of the event. However, most agree that a confrontation involving accusations of kidnapping and theft contributed significantly to the collapse of trust between Cochise and American military authorities. The consequences prove enormous. You can almost feel the tension in the air. An American officer believes Apache individuals are responsible for crimes committed in the region. Cochise insists that his people are innocent. Discussions begin, suspicion grows. Neither side trusts the other fully. That is the problem. Trust, once weakened, becomes difficult to restore. A meeting takes place under conditions already burdened by misunderstanding. What follows becomes one of the most significant turning points in the history of the Southwest. The situation deteriorates rapidly. Attempts at detention occur. Cochise escapes. Violence follows. The fragile relationship shatters. The details remain painful. The consequences spread far beyond the individuals involved. You sit beside a fire one evening as news travels across Apache communities. Faces remain serious. Voices remain quiet. People understand what has happened. A line has been crossed. The future suddenly feels more dangerous. The smell of smoke drifts into the cool night air. Horses stand beyond the firelight. Somewhere in the darkness, a distant owl calls. The peaceful setting contrasts sharply with growing uncertainty. As a conflict expands, Cochise emerges as a central figure in Apache resistance. He is not fighting simply for personal reasons. He believes his people face an increasing threat to their way of life, their security, and their future. Many Apache share those concerns. Many settlers and soldiers possess concerns of their own. The frontier becomes trapped within competing fears, and fear often produces conflict. You travel through the rugged mountains that later become strongly associated with Cochise. The terrain is remarkable. Steep slopes rise above narrow valleys. Hidden passages wind between rock formations. Water sources remain concealed from casual observers. The country seems designed for defense. A rider unfamiliar with the region could easily become lost. An Apache traveler moves with confidence. The advantage is obvious. According to military reports examined by scholars at Yale University and Stanford University, American forces frequently struggle to operate effectively in areas where Apache knowledge of terrain provided substantial advantages. The land remains a powerful ally, perhaps the most reliable ally available. Years of conflict follow. Campaigns are launched. Expeditioners are organized. Settlements demand protection. Apache communities seek survival. Neither side achieves decisive success. The struggle continues. You notice how warfare affects ordinary people most deeply. Families relocate. Travel becomes dangerous, resources become harder to secure, daily life grows more uncertain. The burden extends beyond the battlefield. History often remembers leaders. Communities carry the consequences. A young child watches adults discuss recent events around a fire. The conversation is serious. Concern is visible, yet life must continue. Meals still need preparation. Horses still need care. Children still need guidance. The persistence of ordinary responsibilities feels remarkable. Perhaps that persistence is its own form of courage. As years pass, Cochise develops a reputation that extends throughout the Southwest. To many Apache, he symbolizes determination and leadership. To many American officials, he represents a formidable opponent. Both perceptions contain elements of truth. The reality is more complex than either description alone. Historians continue debating aspects of Cochise's leadership style and strategic decisions. Some emphasize diplomacy alongside resistance. Others focus more heavily upon military actions. The evidence suggests that both dimensions played important roles. Great leaders often operate within multiple realities simultaneously. Cochise appears to be one of them. The sun begins setting behind the mountains. Long shadows stretch across the landscape. The air cools quickly. The view is beautiful and bittersweet because the conflict remains unresolved. Years of violence have created losses on all sides. Communities are exhausted, resources are strained, yet no clear solution has emerged. You sit quietly as evening settles over Apache country. The mountains glow briefly beneath the last light of day before fading into darkness. Cochise remains determined. His people remain resilient. The struggle continues. But change is approaching once again. Not an end to conflict. Not yet. A different possibility. A fragile opportunity for peace. For now, however, the mountains remain watchful. Campfires burn beneath the stars. Families gather together. Leaders consider difficult choices, and one of the most respected Apache figures in history continues carrying the hopes of his people through some of the most challenging years they have ever faced. The mountains remain watchful as the years of conflict continue. For Apache families, war is not a single event. It is not one battle or one campaign. It becomes a condition of life that shapes daily decisions, travel routes, and even ordinary conversations around evening fires. The burden is exhausting, not only physically, emotionally as well. A pale dawn spreads across the rugged southwest. Thin clouds drift above distant peaks. The air feels cool and clean after a night of gentle rain. Water glistens on rocks and leaves. The landscape appears peaceful. Yet beneath that peaceful surface lies constant uncertainty. You travel with a small Apache group moving through familiar country. Horses carry supplies carefully packed for a long journey. Children ride beside parents. Elders move at a steady pace. This is not an army. It is a community. That distinction matters. Popular history often focuses on warriors and battles. Most Apache people spend their lives doing something far more difficult. They endure. Endurance rarely receives the attention it deserves. You quickly notice how conflict changes ordinary routines. A family planning a journey must consider potential dangers. A hunting expedition requires additional caution. Gathering resources becomes more complicated when military patrols operate nearby. Nothing feels entirely simple anymore. Every decision carries additional weight. Research discussed by scholars at Stanford University and the University of New Mexico emphasizes that prolonged frontier warfare affected entire communities rather than only combatants. Women, children, and elders often bore significant burdens during periods of instability. You can see those burdens everywhere. A mother carefully organizes supplies before departure. A grandfather studies the horizon more often than he once did. A young child learns caution at an earlier age than previous generations. The changes are subtle, yet they accumulate. Day after day, year after year, as you continue traveling, the importance of mobility becomes even clearer. Apache communities rely upon movement to maintain flexibility. Camps may shift locations. Families may seek safer areas temporarily. Information travels through extensive networks of relatives and allies. The strategy requires discipline and patience. A hot afternoon settles across the desert. Heat rises in shimmering waves from the ground. The smell of dust hangs heavily in the air. Riders pause beside a hidden spring known only to experienced travelers. The water is precious. The shade is welcome. The moment feels almost luxurious. Simple comforts become valuable during difficult times. You watch children laughing while filling containers with fresh water. For a few minutes, concerns seem distant. Adults relax slightly, horses drink quietly. Then someone arrives carrying news. The mood changes immediately. News matters, especially now. Reports describe military movements in another region. Communities must decide how to respond. Information is discussed carefully. Nobody rushes to conclusions. Experience discourages. Mistakes can prove costly. According to historical records examined by researchers at Yale University and Harvard University, Apache groups often relied upon sophisticated communication networks that allowed information to spread rapidly across large areas. The system is remarkably effective. Messages move through personal relationships. Trust supports the network. The network supports survival. You spend an evening beside a campfire listening to stories shared by older individuals. Some stories describe earlier years before the conflict intensified. Others recount lessons learned during difficult journeys. The atmosphere feels reflective, not bitter. Reflective. One elder pauses while staring into the fire. The silence lasts several moments. Everyone waits respectfully. When he finally speaks, his words focus on perseverance rather than victory. The distinction is important. Perseverance means continuing despite hardship. It means adapting without surrendering identity. It means finding reasons for hope when circumstances provide few. The lesson resonates deeply. As seasons pass, the practical challenges of survival continue. Food must be secured, horses must be cared for, shelter must be maintained, children must be raised. Conflict does not eliminate these responsibilities. If anything, it makes them more demanding. A cold wind sweeps through a mountain valley during early winter. Frost clings to shaded ground. Breath becomes visible in the morning air. The weather adds another layer of difficulty. Yet people adapt. They always have. You watch several families preparing for colder conditions. Additional supplies are gathered. Travel plans are adjusted. Camps are selected carefully. Preparation becomes a form of security. The principle is timeless. Research from the University of Chicago and Princeton University highlights how indigenous communities often demonstrated remarkable resilience through flexible social structures and extensive environmental knowledge. Apache communities rely upon both. Knowledge of the land remains invaluable. Relationships remain invaluable. Together they create strength, not invincibility. Strength. There is a difference. As years of conflict accumulate, losses become unavoidable. Families mourn loved ones. Communities remember those who do not return. The emotional weight grows heavier. Yet grief does not stop life. Children continue growing. Ceremonies continue. Stories continue. The future still demands attention. You notice this resilience during a gathering held after a difficult period. People come together, not only to discuss concerns, but also to reinforce connections. Food is shared. Traditions are honored. Young people learn from elders. The atmosphere contains sadness. It also contains determination. Human beings possess an extraordinary ability to endure. The Apache demonstrate this repeatedly. Historians still debate the effectiveness of various military strategies employed during these years. Some campaigns achieved temporary successes, others produced unintended consequences. Few delivered lasting solutions. The conflict proves stubborn. The Southwest itself contributes to that reality. The terrain favors mobility. The distances are vast. Certainty remains elusive. As evening returns once more, you sit beside a fire beneath a sky crowded with stars. The air is cold enough to encourage people closer to the warmth. Sparks drift upward into the darkness. Nearby, a child falls asleep wrapped in a blanket. An elder continues speaking softly. A horse shifts its weight and exhales into the night. The sounds feel ordinary. That is what makes them meaningful. Despite years of uncertainty, ordinary life survives. Families survive. Communities survive. The conflict has not broken them. It has tested them. And the testing is not over. Far from it. The years ahead will bring new leaders, new campaigns, and new pressures. The United States is becoming increasingly determined to control the Southwest completely. Apache communities understand the challenge. They also understand themselves. They know the land. They know the traditions. They know what they are trying to protect, and beneath the endless stars of the Southwest. That knowledge continues sustaining them through some of the most difficult years in their history. The knowledge that sustains Apache communities through years of hardship will soon be carried forward by another figure whose name becomes known around the world. His name is Geronimo. Few individuals from the American frontier become as famous, yet fame has a way of simplifying people. It turns complex human lives into symbols. It reduces long histories into a handful of dramatic stories. The reality is more complicated and far more interesting as dawn arrives over the mountains of the Southwest. A cool breeze moves through stands of pine and oak. The first sunlight touches distant ridges. Birds call from hidden branches. The landscape feels peaceful. Yet the era remains turbulent. The conflict between Apache communities and the United States continues. Military campaigns expand. Settlements grow. Pressure increases steadily across the region. Many Apache leaders are now facing challenges unlike anything their ancestors experienced. Geronimo emerges within this difficult world. You hear stories about him long before meeting him directly. His reputation spreads through conversations around campfires, through travelers carrying news, and through military reports written by anxious officers. Some stories portray him as fearless, Others portray him as dangerous. Many contain elements of truth. None tell the entire story. Research discussed by historians at Yale University and the University of Arizona notes that Geronimo became one of the most recognizable Apache leaders of the 19th century. Though his public image often differed significantly from the realities of Apache society and politics, that distinction matters. Geronimo is not a chief ruling over all Apache people. Apache communities remain diverse, with different leaders, priorities, and circumstances. Yet his influence becomes substantial because of his determination and ability to inspire followers during an extraordinarily difficult period. You first encounter him in a mountain camp. The atmosphere is quiet, practical, far removed from the legends that will later surround his name. People are preparing food, caring for horses, discussing travel plans, and sharing information. Life continues despite constant uncertainty. Geronimo moves among them, observing, listening, thinking. Leadership often looks less dramatic than people imagine. The southwest of the late 19th century is changing rapidly. Railroads are extending across the region. Settlements continue multiplying. Military resources available to the United States are increasing. The balance of power is shifting. Many Apache understand this clearly, yet understanding a challenge does not mean accepting it. A warm afternoon settles over the mountains as several Apache families discuss recent developments. News arrives from distant communities. More pressure, more restrictions, more demands. Frustration grows, so does determination. Geronimo believes that surrendering too quickly would endanger the future of his people. Others share his concerns. They have witnessed promises broken before. They have experienced uncertainty repeatedly. Trust remains difficult, perhaps impossible. You travel through rugged country alongside a small group moving between hidden camps. The terrain is breathtaking. Narrow canyons twist through mountains. Hidden springs provide precious water. Dense forests cover higher elevations. The land offers protection. It also offers familiarity. Apache knowledge of this country remains extraordinary. According to military records examined by scholars from Stanford University and Harvard University, American forces frequently struggle to locate and track small Apache groups moving through difficult terrain. Local knowledge often provided advantages that technology alone could not overcome. You can easily understand why. The mountains seem endless. The routes seem invisible. A person unfamiliar with the landscape would quickly become disoriented. As military pressure increases, Geronimo becomes associated with continued resistance. His followers remain mobile. They avoid direct confrontations whenever possible. Survival depends upon flexibility rather than conventional warfare. The strategy frustrates American commanders. Again and again, a military officer studies maps late into the evening inside a frontier headquarters. Lantern light flickers across papers spread across a wooden table. Reports arrive from multiple directions. Possible sightings, possible movements, possible locations. The uncertainty is exhausting. The officer wants clear answers. The Southwest rarely provides them. Meanwhile, Apache families continue adapting to difficult conditions. Food remains scarce at times. Travel remains dangerous. Children grow up within an atmosphere of constant movement and vigilance. The burden is immense, yet life continues. You notice this resilience during a quiet evening gathering. The smell of wood smoke drifts through cool air. Someone tells a story. Children listen attentively. Adults exchange news. For a few moments, the pressures of the outside world seem distant. Human beings need such moments. They provide strength. Research from the University of Chicago and Princeton University has highlighted the importance of community cohesion during periods of displacement and conflict. Social bonds often become essential sources of resilience. Apache communities rely heavily upon those bonds. They must. The challenges keep growing. Historians continue debating certain aspects of Geronimo's decisions during these years. Some scholars emphasize the practical difficulties he faced. Others focus on missed opportunities for compromise. Most agree that his choices occurred within circumstances of extraordinary complexity. Judging the past is easy, living it is harder, much harder. As the years pass, the number of options available to resisting Apache groups begins shrinking. Military forces become more coordinated. Surveillance improves. Pressure increases from multiple directions. The reality grows difficult to ignore. The struggle cannot continue forever. Yet many people remain unwilling to abandon hope. The sun sets behind the mountains, painting the sky with deep shades of orange and red. Long shadows stretch across valleys that have witnessed generations of Apache history. The beauty feels almost painful, because change is approaching. Final decisions are drawing closer. You sit beside a fire and watch sparks rise into the darkening sky. The air cools rapidly after sunset. Horses graze nearby. Voices remain low and thoughtful. Geronimo is still free. His followers are still moving. The mountains are still providing shelter, but the pressure is becoming relentless. The next chapter will bring one of the most famous pursuits in American history. Soldiers, scouts, and trackers will cross deserts and mountains in search of a small group determined to remain independent. The chase is about to begin, and the fate of Apache resistance hangs in the balance. The fate of Apache resistance now hangs upon a handful of people moving through one of the harshest landscapes in North America. The pursuit that follows becomes legendary. Newspapers print stories about it, politicians discuss it, military commanders devote enormous resources to it. Decades later, historians will still analyze it. Yet from the perspective of those living through it, the experience feels far less dramatic. It feels exhausting, day after day, week after week, month after month. The first light of dawn spreads across a vast desert basin. The air is cool for now, but the coming afternoon will bring intense heat. Mountains rise in every direction, their dark silhouettes standing against a pale sky. You travel with a small Apache group moving quietly through the landscape. The pace is steady. The destination changes frequently. Remaining in one place for too long carries risks. Geronimo and his followers are now among the most sought-after people in the Southwest. The United States government is determined to end armed resistance completely. Military forces coordinate across enormous distances. Scouts search remote valleys. Patrols monitor water sources and travel routes. The effort is massive, remarkably massive. Research discussed by historians at Yale University and Stanford University notes that thousands of soldiers and scouts participated in operations connected to the final pursuit of Geronimo's small band. The scale of the effort reveals how seriously American authorities viewed the situation. The contrast is striking. A vast military organization, a relatively small group of Apache familiars. Yet the pursuit continues. You climb a rocky ridge and look across miles of rugged country. The terrain seems almost endless. Deep canyons cut through mountains, dry washes wind across desert flats, hidden springs lie concealed among rocks. The land remains difficult. The land remains beautiful. The land remains an ally. Apache knowledge of this environment continues providing advantages. Routes invisible to outsiders become familiar pathways. Water sources unknown to most travelers offer opportunities for survival. A rider pauses briefly beside a spring sheltered by cottonwood trees. The water is cool and clear. Horses drink eagerly, children fill containers while adults scan the surrounding landscape. Nobody relaxes completely. The danger never feels far away. A warm wind carries the scent of dust and dry grass. Insects hum quietly among the vegetation. The scene appears peaceful. Yet everyone understands the reality. Soldiers may be searching nearby. Reports may already be spreading. The journey must continue. According to military accounts examined by researchers from Harvard University and the University of Arizona, the pursuit frequently frustrated commanders because Apache groups moved rapidly across terrain that outsiders often found extremely difficult to navigate. You can understand their frustration. The Southwest refuses predictability. Distance deceives, maps simplify. Reality remains complicated. Days blend together. The routine becomes familiar. Travel, observation, caution, rest, then travel again. The repetition creates its own exhaustion. You notice it in faces around evening fires. People remain determined. They also remain tired. A child falls asleep before finishing a meal. An elder sits quietly staring into the flames. Horses lower their heads after long journeys. Even Mr. Resilience has limits. The emotional burden grows heavier with time. You spend one evening beside a small camp hidden among rocky hills. Darkness settles gradually. The smell of wood smoke mingles with cool night air. Stars appear overhead in astonishing numbers. The sky feels endless. The uncertainty feels endless as well. Conversations remain subdued. Everyone understands the situation. Military pressure is increasing. Resources are limited. Options are narrowing. No dramatic speeches occur. No grand declarations. Only practical discussions about History often unfolds this way. Less like a movie. More like ordinary people making difficult decisions. Research from Princeton University and the University of Chicago highlights how prolonged displacement affects communities psychologically as well as physically. Constant movement creates stress that accumulates over time. You can see that accumulation, yet you also see remarkable perseverance. Families continue caring for one another. Traditions continue, stories continue, small moments of humour still appear unexpectedly. Human beings adapt. They always have. A cool morning arrives after a night of rain. Moisture clings to leaves and stones. The air smells fresh and clean. For a brief moment, the landscape seems renewed. You watch several children playing near camp. They laugh. They chase one another. The sound feels almost surprising. Then you realize something important. Life insists on continuing, even during hardship, perhaps especially during hardship. Meanwhile, military operations continue expanding. Scouts gather information. Officers coordinate movements. Patrols cover enormous distances. The pursuit becomes increasingly sophisticated. Technology improves communication. Resources remain abundant. Time appears to favor the United States. Apache communities understand this reality. Historians still debate whether alternative outcomes were possible during this final phase of resistance. Some scholars emphasize overwhelming military pressure. Others point toward the cumulative effects of exhaustion. Resource shortages and changing conditions throughout the Southwest. The debate remains active. The people involved face immediate realities rather than academic questions. They must decide what comes next. As summer heat intensifies, travel becomes even more demanding. Water sources grow more precious. Horses require careful management. Every mile demands effort. You climb another ridge near sunset and pause to look across the landscape. The view is magnificent. Mountains fade into the distance beneath golden light. Shadows fill valleys. The desert glows softly. It is a homeland worth loving, a homeland worth remembering. That realization helps explain much of what has happened. The pursuit is not only about military objectives, it is also about belonging, about identity, about connection to a place shaped by generations of memory. The stars emerge once again. Campfires flicker briefly before being reduced to small, careful flames. The night grows cool. Somewhere beyond the darkness, soldiers continue searching. Somewhere ahead, difficult decisions await. The pursuit cannot last forever. The mountains know it. The people know it. Geronimo knows it. And as another long day ends beneath the vast sky of the Southwest, the final chapter of Apache resistance moves steadily toward its conclusion. The final chapter of Apache resistance moves steadily toward a conclusion that few people truly welcome. Years of pursuit, uncertainty, and hardship have taken their toll. The mountains still stand, the desert still stretch toward distant horizons. The stars still shine over familiar camps, yet something has changed. The possibilities are narrowing. The weight of exhaustion is becoming impossible to ignore. A pale morning light spreads across the rugged landscape. Cool air settles in the valleys before the coming heat of day. The scent of damp earth lingers from a brief overnight shower. You sit beside a small camp where people are beginning another day. The atmosphere feels subdued, thoughtful. Everyone understands that important decisions are approaching. The military pressure has become relentless. American forces continue searching across vast areas of the southwest and northern Mexico. Scouts gather information. Supply networks remain strong. Communication between military units has improved significantly. The balance of power is no longer in a doubt. The reality is painful. But it is real. Research discussed by historians at Harvard University and Yale University notes that by the final years of resistance, many Apache groups faced increasingly severe constraints. Resources were limited. Safe havens were shrinking. Continuous movement imposed enormous physical and emotional costs. You can see those costs clearly. A horse bears signs of long travel. A child's clothing shows careful repairs. An elder moves more slowly than before. The years have left their mark, not only on individuals, on entire communities. As the days pass, discussions become increasingly focused on the future. Leaders gather to evaluate options. Families consider what might happen next. Hope remains. So does uncertainty. A warm wind sweeps across the desert one afternoon, carrying fine dust through the air. The mountains appear hazy in the distance. Visibility fades. The landscape seems suspended between worlds, much like the people living within it. You listen as several respected individuals discuss recent developments. Their voices remain calm. Nobody speaks carelessly. The subject is too important. Military representatives have communicated terms. Negotiations continue. Possibilities are examined. Trust remains fragile. Years of conflict have made trust difficult. Very difficult. Yet circumstances are forcing decision. According to historical records examined by scholars from Stanford University and the University of Arizona, the final surrender negotiations occurred within a context shaped by exhaustion, strategic realities, and a growing recognition that continued resistance offered diminishing prospects. The conclusion feels unavoidable. Even if it remains heartbreaking, you notice how different people react differently. Some focus on practical concerns, others struggle emotionally, many experience both simultaneously. That response feels deeply human. Few major historical events are experienced in only one way. The same moment can bring relief and sorrow, hope and grief, acceptance and regret, all at once. As evening approaches, the sky glows with soft orange light. Campfires begin appearing across the landscape. Families gather together. The scene feels familiar, yet beneath the familiarity lies tension. Nobody knows exactly what tomorrow will bring. A child asks a question about the future. The adults hesitate before answering, not because they do not care, because certainty is impossible. You sit quietly and watch the firelight dance across thoughtful faces. The smell of smoke drifts upward into the cool evening air. Horses stand nearby, their silhouettes visible against the fading light. The moment feels intimate, personal. History often appears abstract when viewed from a distance. Up close, it consists of conversations like these. Families wondering what comes next, parents worrying about children, elders reflecting upon lives shaped by extraordinary change. Eventually, the long pursuit reaches its conclusion. Geronimo agrees to surrender. The decision becomes one of the most famous moments in the history of the American West. Yet the reality differs sharply from popular mythology. There is no triumphant ending, no universal celebration, only people confronting difficult circumstances. The surrender marks the end of organized Apache resistance against the United States military. It does not mark the end of Apache history. That distinction matters enormously. Research from the University of Chicago and Princeton University has emphasized that indigenous histories did not end with military defeat. Communities adapted, survived, and continued shaping their futures despite profound challenges. The Apache will do the same, but first comes exile. The word itself carries weight, heavy weight. Many Apache who surrender expect certain arrangements. What follows instead brings disappointment and hardship. Individuals who have spent generations connected to specific landscapes now face removal from those homelands. The emotional impact is immense. You imagine looking one final time across familiar mountains, the ridges known since childhood, the valleys filled with memories, the trails travelled by parents and grandparents. Leaving such places is not simply relocation, it is separation. Historians continue discussing aspects of the agreements and expectations surrounding the surrender. Some details remain subjects of scholarly debate. Accounts differ, perspectives vary. What remains beyond dispute is the profound significance of the moment. An era is ending. A new one is beginning, not by choice, but by circumstance. As night settles over the southwest, you stand beneath a sky crowded with stars. The same stars have watched generations of Apache families travel through these lands. They witnessed migrations, ceremonies, celebrations, hardships, and resistance. Tonight they witness farewell, not farewell forever, but farewell to a way of life shaped by freedom of movement across ancestral homelands. The air grows colder, the fire burns lower, voices become quieter. Many people struggle to sleep. The future feels uncertain. The past feels close. The present feels fragile. Yet even within sorrow, resilience remains visible. Families stay together. Traditions remain remembered. Communities continue supporting one another. Those strengths have carried the Apache through centuries. They will be needed again, because surrender is not the end of the story. It is only the end of one chapter. Ahead lies captivity, adaptation, and survival under conditions unlike any the Apache have previously known. The mountains fade into darkness, the night deepens, and a people who have defied empires now prepare to face one final challenge. A people who have defied empires now face a challenge unlike any they have encountered before. The challenge is not a battle. It is not a pursuit through mountains. It is not a raid, a campaign, or a negotiation. It is captivity. For generations, Apache communities have relied upon movement, flexibility, and intimate knowledge of the land. Those qualities help them survive droughts, conflicts, political upheavals, and relentless military pressure. Now they find themselves confined. The contrast is profound. A grey morning dawns over unfamiliar surroundings far from the mountains and deserts of the southwest. The air feels different. The vegetation looks different. Even the sounds seem unfamiliar. You notice it immediately. The landscape no longer speaks the language of memory. Families who once travelled across vast territories now live within restricted boundaries. Guards monitor movement. Regulations shape daily routines. Decisions that once belonged to communities increasingly come from outside authorities. The adjustment is painful. Research discussed by historians at Yale University and the University of New Mexico notes that Apache prisoners experienced enormous hardships following their removal from ancestral homelands. Many struggled with unfamiliar climates, disease, and the psychological impact of confinement. You can understand why. The loss extends beyond geography. It reaches identity itself. A man stands quietly outside temporary housing during the early morning hours. He looks toward the horizon even though nothing familiar appears there. Old habits remain. Hope remains. Memory remains nearby. Children begin another day under circumstances their grandparents could scarcely have imagined. They learn quickly because children always do. Yet the adults understand what has been lost. The understanding never disappears. A warm wind moves through the camp carrying unfamiliar scents. The atmosphere feels heavy with uncertainty. People perform daily tasks because life continues demanding attention. Meals still need preparation. Clothing still requires repair. Children still need guidance. The ordinary responsibilities of existence persist even during extraordinary times. You spend several days observing how Apache families adapt. The process is remarkable. Conditions are difficult, resources are limited, freedom is restricted, yet community survives. That survival matters. A grandmother teaches traditional knowledge to younger relatives. A parent shares stories about places many children have never seen. Elders work carefully to preserve memories that might otherwise fade. The effort is deliberate. Nothing is left to chance. According to research from Stanford University and Harvard University, indigenous communities facing displacement often relied heavily upon oral traditions and family networks to maintain cultural continuity during periods of disruption. The Apache demonstrate this repeatedly. Memory becomes resistance. Teaching becomes resistance. Endurance becomes resistance. A cool evening settles over the camp. Smoke rises from cooking fires. Voices drift through the gathering darkness. The atmosphere is quieter than the mountain camps of earlier years. Yet something familiar remains. People still gather together. People still tell stories. People still care for one another. The foundations established generations ago continue providing strength. You sit beside an elder as he describes the mountains of the southwest to several children. His voice remains steady. The details are vivid. Hidden springs, narrow canyon, pine forests high above desert valleys. The children listen carefully. Some have only faint memories of those places. Others have none at all. Yet through stories, the landscapes remain alive. The power of memory to tree is extraordinary. Historians continue debating how different Apache communities adjusted to confinement and relocation. Some evidence suggests variations in experience depending upon location and circumstances. Not every community faced identical challenges. What remains clear is the scale of the disruption. Lives were transformed. Entire ways of living were altered. The emotional burden proves difficult to measure. A young parent watches children playing during the afternoon. Their laughter brings comfort. It also brings sadness. The future belongs to them. But what kind of future will it be? The question lingers. No easy answer exists. Disease creates another challenge. Unfamiliar environments expose communities to health threats that prove devastating. Families suffer losses. Grief becomes a frequent companion. Research examined by scholars at the University of Chicago and Princeton University highlights the severe impact that disease often had upon displaced populations throughout history. The Apache experience reflects this painful reality. The losses are deeply personal. Names disappear from family circle. Stories end too soon. Yet life continues. It must. Human beings possess an astonishing capacity for adaptation. You witness this capacity every day. Individuals find ways to maintain dignity despite difficult circumstances. Communities create routines that provide stability. Traditions evolve without disappearing. Adaptation does not mean forgetting. Adaptation means surviving. The distinction is important. As months become years, some aspects of captivity become familiar. Familiarity does not equal acceptance. It simply reflects the human ability to adjust to changing conditions. A rainy afternoon transforms pathways into muddy tracks. Water drips steadily from rooftops. Children splash through puddles while adults seek shelter. For a moment, the scene could belong almost anywhere. Then you remember the larger context. These are people living far from home. The realization returns again and again. Yet alongside sorrow, resilience continues growing. You see it in families preserving traditions. You see it in elders teaching history. You see it in young people learning who they are despite difficult circumstances. Identity survives, perhaps not unchanged. But it survives. Historians still debate how much federal authorities understood the cultural consequences of relocation policies during this period. Some scholars emphasize ignorance, others emphasize indifference. Most agree that the human costs proved enormous. Those costs echo through generations. The evening sky darkens gradually. Stars emerge overhead. They are not the same stars seen from a different world, of course, but they feel different somehow. Perhaps because the mountains are missing. Perhaps because memory is present. Perhaps because both are true. You sit quietly beside a fading fire and reflect upon everything you have witnessed. Military resistance has ended. Freedom of movement has ended. Yet something essential remains intact. The Apache is still in. Families remain. Stories remain, traditions remain, hope remains. The challenge now is not defeating an enemy in the field. The challenge is preserving a people through years of uncertainty. And despite every hardship, they continue doing exactly that. Despite every hardship, the Apache continue preserving themselves. Years pass, then more years. Children become adults. Adults become elders. The memories of captivity remain powerful, yet life refuses to stand still. Communities begin searching for ways not merely to survive, but to rebuild. The task is enormous. The determination is greater. A soft morning light filters across the landscape. The air feels fresh after a night of rain. Water droplets cling to grass and leaves. Birds move through nearby trees, filling the silence with brief songs. The world continues. It always does. You walk through a community where families are beginning another ordinary day. Smoke rises from cooking fires. People greet one another. Children hurry toward lessons and responsibilities. At first glance, the scene appears simple. Look closer. It represents something remarkable. A people who endured warfare, displacement, imprisonment, and loss are still creating a future. That future begins with rebuilding. Research discussed by historians at Harvard University and Yale University emphasizes that many indigenous communities across North America demonstrated extraordinary resilience after periods of forced removal. Cultural survival often depended upon local leadership, family networks, and the ability to adapt without abandoning identity. The Apache embody those qualities. You see them everywhere. An elder teaches traditional stories. A parent explains family history. A craftsman passes skills to a younger generation. Each lesson matters. Each lesson strengthens continuity. The process unfolds quietly. No newspapers celebrate it. No monuments record every moment. Yet these moments shape the future. A warm breeze moves through the settlement as people gather for a community event. Conversations fill the air. Familiar faces greet one another. News is exchanged. The atmosphere feels hopeful. Not carefree, hopeful. There is a difference. The past remains present. Many individuals remember the years of conflict and captivity vividly. Some still carry emotional wounds. Others carry physical reminders. Memory remains powerful, but memory does not prevent progress. You spend time with several families discussing the changes they have witnessed. Their stories vary. Some focus on hardship, others emphasize perseverance. Most include both. Human experience rarely fits into simple categories. One woman describes learning traditions from grandparents who feared those traditions might disappear. Her voice carries gratitude. They did not disappear. They survived. The survival feels precious. According to research from Stanford University and the University of New Mexico, cultural continuity often depends upon deliberate efforts to preserve language, stories, ceremonies, and community knowledge across generations. The Apache understand this deeply. Preservation requires effort. Effort requires commitment. Commitment requires belief in the future. A young boy listens attentively as an elder describes life in the mountains before removal. The story includes details that bring the landscape alive. Cold streams, pine forests, rocky ridges glowing beneath sunset light. The boy has never seen some of these places, yet through storytelling, they become part of his inheritance. Memory creates connection. Connection creates identity. The chain continues. As communities rebuild, education becomes increasingly important. New generations must learn how to navigate a changing world while remaining connected to their heritage. The balance is not always easy. Few worthwhile things are. You observe teachers helping students acquire skills needed for contemporary life, while also encouraging respect for traditional knowledge. The effort requires patience and creativity. Both worlds matter. Ignoring either would create problems. Research from the University of Chicago and Princeton University highlights how indigenous communities frequently balanced adaptation and cultural preservation rather than choosing one at the expense of the other. The Apache experience reflects this pattern. Adaptation does not equal surrender. Preservation does not require isolation. The relationship is more nuanced. A cool evening settles across the community. The smell of food drifts through the air. Families gather together after long days of work and responsibility. Children laugh nearby. The sound feels comforting. It also feels significant. Generations once faced uncertainty about whether their communities would endure. Now new generations are growing, learning, and preparing for futures their ancestors struggled to protect. The realization carries emotional weight. You pause and reflect. The people sitting around these fires are connected to centuries of history. They carry memories of migration, adaptation, conflict, captivity, and survival. Yet they are not trapped by the past. They are building upon it. Historians continue debating the degree to which government policies during different periods either supported or hindered Apache efforts to rebuild communities. Some initiatives produced opportunities. Others created additional obstacles. The historical record remains complex. The broader outcome is undeniable. The Apache survived. Not unchanged, but survived. A light rain begins falling shortly after sunset. Drops strike rooftops softly. The scent of wet earth rises into the cool air. People move indoors. Conversations continue. Stories continue. Life continues. The ordinary rhythm feels almost miraculous when viewed against the backdrop of everything that came before. A grandmother smiles while watching grandchildren play. A father repairs equipment needed for tomorrow's work. Young adults discuss plans for the future. The scenes are ordinary. That is exactly why they matter. The goal of survival was never simply to endure hardship. The goal was to preserve the possibility of ordinary life, of family, of community, of continuity. You notice how hope now appears more frequently in conversations. Challenges remain. Economic difficulties remain. Political issues remain. Yet hope remains too. Perhaps that is the most important development. As the night deepens, stars emerge between passing clouds. The air grows cooler. The community gradually becomes quieter. You sit beside a fading fire and think about the generations who carried Apache identity through extraordinary adversity. Their efforts created the foundation upon which rebuilding became possible. The foundation is strong enough to support another chapter, strong enough to face the modern world, strong enough to ensure that the story of the Apache continues far beyond the struggles of the 19th century. And as the fire settles into glowing embers, you realize that endurance alone never defined the Apache. Renewal did as well. Renewal becomes one of the defining themes of Apache life in the 20th century and beyond. The years continue moving forward. Decades pass. The world changes at a pace that would have seemed unimaginable to earlier generations. Automobiles replace long wagon journeys. Telephones connect distant places. Airplanes cross skies once known only to birds and clouds. The modern age arrives, and the Apache enter it carrying centuries of memory. A golden sunrise spreads across the southwest. Light touches mountains that have witnessed countless generations. The air feels cool and clean. Desert plants cast long shadows across the earth. The landscape remains familiar. The world surrounding it does not. You travel through Apache communities during a period of transformation. New opportunities appear alongside new challenges. Roads improve access to distant towns. Schools expand educational possibilities. Economic changes reshape daily life. Adaptation continues. It always has. The difference now is the scale of change. Research discussed by historians at Harvard University and the University of California notes that indigenous communities throughout the 20th century navigated rapid social, political, and economic transformations while working to preserve cultural continuity. The Apache experience reflects this reality. Communities must constantly balance tradition and innovation. The task requires wisdom. You meet families whose lives combine both worlds. An elder shares stories passed down through generations. A younger relative discusses modern education and professional goals. Neither perspective excludes the other. Instead, they coexist. The relationship feels natural. A young woman attends school during the day and participates in community traditions during the evening. A veteran returns home after military service and reconnects with family history. A craftsman preserves traditional skills while adapting to changing markets. The examples are everywhere. Identity evolves. Identity survives. A warm afternoon settles over a reservation community. Children play beneath a bright sky, vehicles travel along roads connecting homes, schools, and workplaces. The sounds of modern life blend with older rhythms. The scene would surprise many 19th century observers, yet certain elements remain unchanged. Family still matters. Community still matters. Memory still matters. Those foundations continue providing strength. According to research from Stanford University and the University of New Mexico, cultural resilience often depends upon maintaining meaningful connections between generations. Knowledge survives most effectively when it remains part of daily life, rather than existing only in archives or museums. The Apache understand this well. History is not merely remembered, it is lived. You spend time listening to community members discuss the future. Their concerns resemble those found in many places: economic opportunities, education, healthcare, environmental issues. The conversations are contemporary, yet historical awareness remains present. People know where they came from. That knowledge influences where they hope to go. A grandfather sits beneath the shade of a tree describing family history to several grandchildren. His voice is calm. The children listen carefully. He speaks about ancestors, about mountains, about perseverance. The lessons feel timeless. Technology changes. Human values endure. Research from Yale University and Princeton University highlights how many indigenous communities have worked actively to revitalize languages, preserve cultural practices, and strengthen historical awareness during the modern era. The effort requires dedication. Language classes are organized. Traditional knowledge is shared. Historical sites are protected. The work continues. You notice how important memory remains. Not memory used to dwell endlessly on loss, memory used to create understanding. There is a difference. The past contains pain. It also contains wisdom. Communities draw upon both. A cool evening arrives. The scent of food drifts through the air. Families gather after work, school, and daily responsibilities. Laughter carries across the community. The atmosphere feels hopeful, not because challenges have disappeared, because people continue facing them. That distinction matters. Every generation encounters difficulties. The forms change. The need for resilience does not. You observe young people learning about Apache history. Some are surprised by the details. Others feel pride. Most experience a mixture of emotions. The story is powerful. A people survived migration, colonial expansion, warfare, captivity, and displacement. That history deserves attention. It also deserves accuracy. Historians continue debating certain interpretations of specific events and policies from the past. New research occasionally reveals additional details. Perspectives evolve as evidence is examined. The debates remain mortars. Yet the larger narrative remains clear. The Apache endured. They adapted. They continued. A light breeze moves through the desert after sunset. Stars emerge overhead just as they did centuries ago. The sky links generations in a way few things can. An elder notices the stars and smiles. Perhaps ancestors once looked at the same constellations. Perhaps future generations will do the same. The thought feels comforting. You reflect upon how much has changed since the days when Apache communities first encountered Europeans. Entire empires have risen and fallen. Borders have shifted repeatedly. Technologies have transformed daily life. Yet Apache communities remain, not as relics, not as memories, as living people shaping their own futures. That reality is important. Too often, indigenous history is discussed only in the past tense. The Apache exist firmly in the present. Their story continues unfolding every day. Children are born, families grow, communities evolve. The future remains open. As night deepens, you sit quietly beneath the stars. The air has grown cooler. The sounds of the community gradually soften. You think about the long journey that has brought the Apache from ancient migrations to the modern world. The path was rarely easy. Often it was extraordinarily difficult. Yet the journey continues, and the final reflection still awaits. One more chapter remains beneath the endless sky of the Southwest. A chapter not about survival alone, but about legacy. The final reflection arrives beneath the same vast sky that has watched over the Apache for centuries. The mountains remain, the deserts remain, the stars remain, and the people remain. As you settle into the last stage of this long journey, the story stretches behind you like a winding trail disappearing into the distance. It crosses forests and deserts, rivers and mountains, camps and settlements, moments of peace and moments of conflict. It is a story of endurance. But not endurance alone. It is also a story of identity. A soft dawn spreads across the southwest. Golden light touches distant peaks. Shadows retreat slowly from the valleys below. The air feels cool and still. The landscape seems timeless. Yet you know better now. Every ridge contains memories. Every canyon contains stories. Generations of Apache families traveled these lands long before foreign empires arrived. They learned the rhythms of seasons. They discovered hidden springs. They built communities rooted in cooperation, knowledge, and adaptability. Those achievements matter. They deserve remembrance. Research discussed by historians at Harvard University and Stanford University emphasizes that the Apache were never simply participants in the history of the American Southwest. They were among its creators, shaping regional events for centuries through trade, diplomacy, adaptation, and resistance. The observation feels important. Too often, historical narratives treat indigenous peoples as background figures. The Apache were never background figures. They were central actors in their own story, and in the story of the Southwest itself. You think back to the earliest generations you encountered during this journey. Families moving through rugged landscapes, children learning survival skills, elders sharing knowledge beside evening fires. Those moments seem distant now, yet they remain connected to everything that followed. The ability to adapt, the commitment to community, the respect for experience. These qualities carried the Apache through extraordinary challenges. A warm breeze drifts across the desert as the day grows brighter. Birds move through the sky above. The scent of earth and sage lingers in the air. The beauty feels familiar. The beauty survived. So did the people. You reflect upon the arrival of the Spanish, the spread of horses, the rise of conflict along expanding frontiers, and the transformation of the Southwest through competing empires and governments. Each era brought uncertainty. Each era demanded adaptation. The Apache responded repeatedly, sometimes through diplomacy, sometimes through movement, sometimes through resistance, always through resilience. According to research from Yale University and the University of Arizona, indigenous communities often demonstrated remarkable flexibility in responding to changing political and environmental conditions. The Apache provide one of the strongest examples of this pattern in North American history. Flexibility became strength. Strength became survival. The chain continues. You remember Cochise standing firm during difficult years. You remember Geronimo leading followers through mountains and deserts during the final period of resistance. Their names became famous, yet countless other individuals also shaped Apache history. Parents protecting children, elders preserving traditions, travelers carrying information, families rebuilding communities. History belongs to them as well. Apps especially. Them, a cool stream flows quietly through a mountain valley. Sunlight sparkles across the water. The scene feels peaceful. You pause. The pause feels necessary, because the story you have followed is not merely historical. It is human. The Apache experienced grief, hope, fear, courage, exhaustion, and determination. The same emotions experienced by people everywhere. Different circumstances, Similar hearts. The realization creates connection across centuries. Historians continue debating specific details surrounding events, leaders, and policies. New evidence occasionally emerges. Interpretations evolve. That process is health. History benefits from careful examination, yet certain conclusions remain clear. The Apache survived challenges that might have destroyed many societies. They maintained identity despite displacement. They preserved memory despite disruption. They rebuilt communities despite loss. Those accomplishments deserve respect. A gentle evening settles across the southwest. The sky turns shades of gold, orange, and deep purple. Long shadows stretch across the land. The day is ending. So is the journey. You sit beside a quiet fire as darkness approaches. The smell of wood smoke drifts upward. Somewhere nearby, a horse shifts softly. The familiar sounds feel comforting. The atmosphere encourages reflection. You think about the children who inherited stories from grandparents, the leaders who carried responsibility during difficult years, the families who refused to let traditions disappear. Legacy is not created through monuments alone. Legacy lives within people. The Apache legacy continues today. It exists in communities across the Southwest. It exists in preserved languages and traditions. It exists in historical memory. It exists in future generations. Most importantly, it exists because people chose to carry it forward. The stars begin appearing overhead one by one. The same stars that watched ancient migrations. The same stars that watched colonial frontiers. The same stars that watched resistance, captivity, rebuilding, and renewal. They shine above the modern world now. Unchanged, patient, enduring, and beneath those stars, the story of the Apache continues. Not as a chapter closed long ago, not as a relic of the cast, as a living legacy. A legacy shaped by courage, adaptation, community, and memory. A legacy that reminds us that even the most difficult chapters of history do not always have the final word. Sometimes survival has the final word. Sometimes renewal has the final word. And sometimes, beneath the endless sky of the Southwest, a people endure long enough to transform hardship into heritage. The fire burns lower. The night grows quiet. The mountains fade into darkness. And the story rests gently beneath the stars. Thank you for spending this journey through the complete history of the Apache with me tonight. If there was a moment that stayed with you, whether it was the mountain camps, the resilience of families during captivity, the leadership of Cochise, or the determination of Geronimo, I would love to hear about it in the comments. Sharing your favorite part helps keep these stories alive and allows others to connect with the past through your perspective. If you enjoyed this peaceful historical journey, take a moment to explore another story on the channel. There are many more civilizations, frontiers, empires, and forgotten worlds waiting beyond the next horizon. Wherever you are listening from tonight, thank you for being here, and thank you for helping preserve curiosity about the people who came before us. Until our next journey through history, may your evening be peaceful and your rest be deep. Blessings to you and your family.